Close your eyes and drift back, long ago, to a galaxy at war. The year is 22 BBY. The Clone Wars have just begun, a conflict that will rage across the stars, changing the fate of Jedi, clones, and entire worlds. Tonight, we'll journey through the very first year of this galactic struggle, month by month, battle by battle, from the sands of Geonosis to the shadows of Coruscant. Let the story of heroes, betrayals, and endless stars carry you into sleep as we recount the entire first year of the Clone Wars. The Galactic Republic stood on a knife's edge, its thousand-year stability cracking under mounting pressure. Coruscant's rain-slicked towers gleamed under perpetual twilight, reflecting a galaxy divided. Senators hurried through polished corridors, their cloaks damp with worry and precipitation. Whispers of dissent echoed through marble halls, growing louder each passing day. The separatist crisis had simmered for years, fueled by corporate greed and planetary grievances. Chancellor Palpatine moved like a shadow through political chambers, his hands seemingly clean yet pulling invisible strings. His eyes held a knowing calm that unsettled even his closest allies. The air itself felt heavy with impending change, thick with unspoken truths. In the Senate rotunda, thousands of representatives argued across holographic divides. Their voices merged into a cacophony of competing interests, drowning out reason. The assassination attempt on Senator Amidala had shattered any remaining illusion of unity. Explosions had torn through her Naboo cruiser, leaving debris scattered like confetti over diplomatic districts. Padme Amidala survived, but the message was clear: no one was safe. Palpatine seized the moment, his voice trembling with manufactured outrage as he demanded increased security powers. His performance was masterful, convincing even the most skeptical senators. Behind closed doors, he smiled as fear did his work for him. Count Dooku watched from his Sereno palace, sipping wine as the Republic unraveled. His elegant fingers traced maps of star systems ready to break away. The former Jedi Master had become the face of rebellion, his charisma drawing thousands to his cause. His public speeches spoke of freedom and reform, but his private meetings involved darker dealings. Corporate titans pledged their droid armies to his confederacy of independent systems. The Trade Federation's viceroy bowed before him, their battle droids already massing in secret. Dooku's eyes burned with conviction, believing he was saving the galaxy from corruption. He remained unaware that he too was a pawn in a greater game. Coruscant's lower levels buzzed with rumors and conspiracies. In shadowy cantinas, patrons exchanged hushed stories about Senate betrayals. Some spoke of Palpatine's sudden rise from obscurity to Chancellor with suspicious speed. Others whispered about Dooku's mysterious departure from the Jedi Order years prior. The rain intensified, drumming against transparent steel windows like nervous fingers. Steam rose from vents, mingling with the scent of ozone and wet pavement. Speeders sliced through downpours, their headlights creating halos in the mist. The city planet seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The Jedi Council convened in their temple spire, faces etched with concern. Master Yoda closed his eyes, feeling tremors in the Force like distant thunder. Mace Windu paced, his jaw tight with barely contained frustration. They had dispatched Jedi to mediate conflicts across the Outer Rim, but their efforts failed like sandcastles against tides. Something darker was at work, manipulating events with precision. Their investigations hit dead ends, blocked by political maneuvering and corporate secrecy. The Senate's trust in their ancient order had eroded over decades. Now they stood as observers to a galaxy tearing itself apart. Palpatine addressed the Senate from his podium, voice resonating with false gravitas. He spoke of unity while sowing division, offering security while demanding sacrifice. His emergency measures passed with overwhelming support, granting him unprecedented authority. Senators who opposed him found themselves discredited, their careers destroyed by carefully timed scandals. The Chancellor's network of informants grew, eyes and ears in every corner of government. He played both sides, encouraging rebellion while publicly condemning it. His double identity remained hidden, his Sith presence masked by political charm. The galaxy's fate balanced on his words, though none realized it. Dooku stood before thousands of cheering supporters on Raxus Secundus. His crimson robes flowed as he denounced the Republic's decay and corruption. With dramatic flourish, he declared the formation of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Dozens of star systems seceded that day, their senators tearing Republic badges from their chests. The CIS flag unfurled, a bold symbol of defiance against galactic authority. Droid armies stood ready on conquered worlds, their metallic forms glinting under alien suns. The Republic responded with sanctions and blockades, but it was too little, too late. War was no longer a possibility, it had become inevitable. Coruscant skyline glittered like a jewel necklace around the Senate district. Rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean while leaving stains on political ideals. In quiet offices, senators drafted declarations of war or peace, their pens scratching like frightened insects. The Jedi prepared for conflict they couldn't prevent, their lightsabers feeling heavier than ever before. Ordinary citizens watched news feeds with growing dread, wondering how their lives would change. The Chancellor assured them all was under control, his smile never reaching his eyes. Behind the scenes, clones were being bred on Camino, their existence still a secret. But the galaxy's fate was sealed on a desert world. The transmission cut through space like a knife. Obi-Wan's face strained and desperate. His hologram flickered in the Jedi Council chamber, surrounded by concerned masters. "Geonosis," he gasped, voice cracking with static and pain. Behind him, insectoid forms moved in shadows, their chittering voices barely audible. The connection died abruptly, leaving only silence and dread. Mace Windu's hand tightened on the hilt of his lightsaber. Yoda's ears drooped, sensing the darkness gathering like storm clouds. Anakin Skywalker watched from the corner, his knuckles white with barely contained fury. The transmission had revealed more than danger, it had unveiled a conspiracy. Geonosis baked under twin suns, its red surface cracked and parched. Obi-Wan hung in restraints within a petrified forest, the fossilized trees reaching like skeletal fingers. The air tasted of dust and something metallic, like blood on the tongue. Geonosians moved around him, their exoskeletons clicking as they worked at strange consoles. He watched Count Dooku approach, the former Jedi's robes pristine despite the harsh environment. "The Jedi Order has become arrogant, Obi-Wan," Dooku said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "This confederacy will bring peace to a galaxy corrupted by Republic bureaucracy." Obi-Wan spat in the dust, defiance burning in his eyes despite his chains. Anakin paced the Jedi Temple, his frustration radiating like heat waves. Padme Amidala stood beside him, her senatorial composure barely masking her fear. "The Council won't send enough Jedi," Anakin insisted, his voice tight with emotion. "They'll debate while Master Kenobi suffers." Padme placed a hand on his arm, her touch cool against his feverish skin. "We can't wait," she said, determination hardening her features. "I have contacts in the Outer Rim who can get us there." Anakin's eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. They would defy orders, defy logic, and fly straight into the heart of darkness. Their ship cut through Geonosis's atmosphere, buffeted by thermal updrafts. The landscape below unfurled like a nightmare. Rock spires piercing crimson skies, industrial complexes belching smoke. Padme piloted with steady hands, her face set in concentration. Anakin checked his lightsaber, the blue blade humming to life with a familiar snap hiss. The smell of ozone filled the cockpit as they descended through acidic clouds. Below, the Petranaki arena loomed, its circular shape like a maw ready to swallow them whole. "This is a trap," Anakin muttered, though they both knew it already. Padme nodded, her jaw tight with resolve. They infiltrated the arena through maintenance tunnels, the air thick with the stench of machinery. Distant roars echoed through metal corridors, suggesting creatures held in captivity. Padme moved with surprising grace, her senatorial gown exchanged for practical combat gear. Anakin's senses stretched outward, feeling the darkness coiling around them like a serpent. They found Obi-Wan just as he was being led to the arena center, his wrists bound and face bruised. "Anakin," he called out, relief warring with warning in his voice. "You shouldn't have come." But it was too late. Alarms blared, and Geonosian guards swarmed from all directions. The arena floor burned under the twin suns, sand shifting like molten glass. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme stood back to back, surrounded by jeering Geonosians. Count Dooku watched from a private box, his expression unreadable. "You have interfered for the last time," he announced, his voice amplified across the stadium. Gates opened, releasing monstrous creatures, the Reek, the Nexu, the Acklay, each more terrifying than the last. Padme's blaster rose, firing precise shots that ricocheted off armored hides. Anakin moved like a whirlwind, his lightsaber a blue blur deflecting attacks. Obi-Wan fought with disciplined precision, conserving energy while seeking advantage. The battle raged, dust mixing with the coppery scent of blood. Padme was thrown from the Reek's back, her body hitting the arena floor with sickening force. Anakin roared in fury, his connection to the Force flaring like a supernova. He charged the Acklay, his blade slicing through one of its claws with a spray of ichor. Obi-Wan dodged the Nexu's pounce, his movements economical and deadly. The crowd's cheers rose to fever pitch, a deafening chorus of bloodlust. Padme stirred, consciousness returning as she scrambled for her fallen blaster. Above, Dooku watched with clinical interest, as if studying specimens rather than warriors. Just as defeat seemed inevitable, a new sound cut through the chaos. Republic gunships descended like avenging angels, their ramp doors opening to reveal white-armored figures. Clone troopers poured onto the arena floor, their armor blinding under the harsh sunlight. Blaster fire erupted in disciplined patterns, cutting down droid guards with ruthless efficiency. For the Republic, their commander shouted, voice amplified through his helmet. Mace Windu landed with his Jedi strike team, purple lightsaber blazing as he confronted Dooku. The Separatist leader retreated, his escape craft rising from the arena floor. The tide had turned, but the cost was already mounting. The battle spilled into Geonosis's petrified forests, where ancient trees stood frozen in time. Clone troopers moved in formation, their white armor stark against the red landscape. Jedi Knights led charges into droid lines, lightsabers humming as they deflected incoming fire. The air grew thick with ozone from blasters and the acrid smell of melting metal. Underfoot, the crunch of bone and armor, mixed with the brittle snap of fossilized wood. Droid armies advanced relentlessly, their red photoreceptors glowing like malevolent eyes. Clones fell, their bodies crumpling without sound as comrades stepped over them. The forest itself seemed to groan under the weight of so much violence. Anakin fought with terrifying ferocity, his movements fueled by fear and rage. He carved through droids like a scythe through wheat, his blue blade leaving trails of light. Padme fought beside him, her blaster picking off targets with deadly accuracy. Obi-Wan coordinated clone squads, his voice calm despite the surrounding chaos. The ground trembled as ATT walkers crushed undergrowth, their heavy cannons pounding droid positions. Geonosian warriors emerged from hidden tunnels, their sonic weapons disorienting Republic forces. The battle became a maelstrom of light and sound, death and survival. No one noticed the dark figure watching from a distant ridge, calculating every move. As twilight fell, the Separatist forces began to retreat. Droid carriers lifted off, abandoning their ground troops to destruction. Clone troopers cheered, their voices ringing through the silent forest. Jedi extinguished their lightsabers, the sudden absence of their hum almost deafening. Padme tended to a wounded clone, her hands gentle despite the blood coating them. Anakin stared at the carnage, his face pale under the fading light. Obi-Wan placed a hand on his shoulder, the gesture heavy with unspoken meaning. They had won the battle, but at what cost? The Republic had secured Geonosis, but the victory felt hollow. Bodies littered the forest floor, clone, droid, and Geonosian alike. Medical teams moved through the carnage, their glow rods casting eerie shadows. The smell of death mixed with the metallic tang of blaster residue. Anakin helped carry stretchers, his earlier fury replaced by grim determination. Padme spoke with survivors, her voice soft but authoritative. In the quiet that followed, the true cost became clear. Clone troopers sat in small groups, cleaning their weapons with mechanical efficiency. Jedi Masters tended to wounded Padawans, their faces etched with sorrow. The twin suns set, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Somewhere in the distance, a droid's photoreceptor flickered and died. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of ozone and something else, something like regret. Victory tasted like ash. The dust settled slowly over Geonosis, coating everything in a fine red powder that tasted of regret. Republic forces stood victorious among the ruins, their white armor stained with the planet's blood-red soil. Clone troopers moved with mechanical precision, securing positions and processing prisoners. The cost of victory became apparent as medics moved through the ranks, tending to wounded brothers. Jedi Masters conferred in hushed tones, their faces etched with concern beneath their hoods. The first battle of the Clone Wars had been won, but the price was staggering. Geonosian workers scurried through the wreckage, their chittering cries echoing across the devastated landscape. The air hung heavy with the acrid scent of blaster fire and something else, the metallic tang of industry. In the Republic Command Center, holographic displays flickered with casualty reports. The numbers scrolled endlessly, each digit representing a life lost or altered forever. Clone Commander Cody studied the data, his helmet tucked under one arm. "We've secured the surface, sir," he reported to Obi-Wan Kenobi, his voice devoid of emotion. "But intelligence suggests significant droid production continues underground." Obi-Wan nodded, his gaze distant as he considered the implications. The victory was incomplete, a fact that gnawed at his Jedi sensibilities. Outside, the twin suns beat down mercilessly, baking the wounded landscape. The sound of machinery still rumbled beneath the surface, a persistent reminder of the enemy's resilience. The Jedi Council convened via hologram, their spectral forms hovering in the command tent. Mace Windu's expression was grim as he outlined the next phase of operations. "We cannot allow these factories to remain operational," he stated, his voice leaving no room for debate. "A second invasion force will penetrate the catacombs and destroy the production facilities." Yoda closed his eyes, feeling the tremors in the force that spoke of impending darkness. "Destroy them we must," he agreed, "but careful we must be." The decision was made with heavy hearts, knowing it would send more clones into the planet's depths. Clone troopers prepared for the underground assault, their armor reflecting the glow of portable generators. They checked their weapons with practiced efficiency, movements honed by years of training. Among them, a young clone designated CT-7567, known as Rex, adjusted his helmet with particular care. His squad gathered around him, their identical faces showing varying degrees of apprehension. "Keep your comms open," Rex instructed, his voice calm despite the tension in his shoulders. These tunnels could collapse at any moment. The clones nodded, their training overriding their fear. They were bred for this moment, engineered to face death without hesitation. The entrance to the catacombs yawned like a hungry beast, its darkness absolute. Geonosian architecture twisted into nightmarish shapes, organic and mechanical fused together. Clone engineers planted charges at key structural points, their movements precise and deliberate. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, ozone from overloaded power systems. As the charges detonated, the ground shuddered violently, opening new passages into the depths. Dust and debris rained down, forcing clones to shield their eyes. When the tremors subsided, the way forward lay open, revealing a labyrinth of tunnels stretching into darkness. The descent into Geonosis's underworld was like entering another dimension. Temperature rose steadily as they went deeper, sweat beading on clone foreheads beneath their helmets. Glowing fungi cast eerie blue light on tunnel walls, revealing strange carvings and machinery. The sound of dripping water mixed with the distant hum of active factories. Clone scouts moved ahead, their helmet lamps cutting through the oppressive darkness. Every shadow seemed to move, every echo sounded like approaching enemies. The weight of the planet above pressed down on them, a constant reminder of their vulnerability. Still they advanced, their footsteps echoing in the confined spaces. The first droid factory they encountered was a scene of organized chaos. Conveyor belts carried unfinished battle droids through assembly lines, their mechanical limbs twitching as components were attached. Geonosian overseers directed operations with sharp clicks and gestures, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the factory's harsh lighting. Clone troopers moved with lethal efficiency, planting explosives at critical junctions, the air filled with the smell of molten metal as cutting torches sliced through infrastructure. Droid guards swarmed the intruders, their photoreceptors glowing with malevolent intent. Blaster fire erupted in the confined space, ricocheting off metal walls. The factory became a battleground, its purpose twisted from creation to destruction. In the chaos of battle, disaster struck without warning. A structural support gave way, bringing tons of rock down on a clone squad. Their desperate cries cut through the comm channels, abruptly silenced by the crushing weight. Rex sprinted toward the collapse, his heart pounding despite his training. "Echo 3, report," he shouted into his comm, but only static answered. The dust cleared to reveal a wall of rubble where his brothers had stood moments before. Clone engineers rushed to assess the stability of surrounding tunnels, their faces grim. The first losses of the underground campaign had been claimed not by enemy fire but by the planet itself. The realization settled over the squad like a physical weight. The destruction of the first factory sent shockwaves through the underground network. Explosions rippled through connected tunnels, causing secondary collapses and system failures. Molten metal flowed like rivers as containment units breached, casting hellish light on the carnage. Clone troopers retreated to safe distances, watching as the heart of separatist production burned. Geonosian workers fled in terror, their chittering cries rising to panicked shrieks. The sound echoed through the tunnels, an eerie counterpoint to the roar of destruction. Republic forces regrouped, preparing to push deeper into the catacombs. The victory was tangible, but its cost measured in buried brothers and shattered confidence. As they advanced, the scale of Geonosian industry became increasingly apparent. Tunnel after tunnel revealed specialized facilities, droid foundries, weapon plants, vehicle assembly lines. Each represented a node in the Confederacy's war machine, each requiring systematic destruction. Clone demolition teams worked tirelessly, their movements synchronized through years of training. The air grew increasingly toxic, filled with industrial fumes and smoke from burning materials. Respirators became essential as visibility decreased in the thickening haze. Jedi Knights moved among the clones, their lightsabers cutting through obstacles and deflecting occasional droid attacks. The mission had transformed from assault to demolition, from battle to methodical dismantling. The final detonations were choreographed to maximum effect. Explosives triggered in sequence, causing a cascade of destruction through the interconnected facilities. The ground trembled violently as the planet's industrial heart was torn apart. Clone troopers retreated to safe distances, watching as the catacombs collapsed in on themselves. Molten metal flowed like lava through newly formed fissures, casting the tunnels in hellish light. Geonosian screeches reached a fever pitch before falling silent as their world collapsed around them. The sound echoed through the remaining tunnels, a haunting requiem for a civilization's ambition. Republic forces emerged into the harsh sunlight, their armor blackened by soot and smoke. On the surface, the scale of victory became clear. Smoke billowed from countless fissures where the underground factories had been. Geonosian survivors stumbled through the wreckage, their once proud civilization reduced to rubble. Clone troopers established defensive positions, their movements automatic despite exhaustion. Medical teams treated the wounded, their faces etched with fatigue beneath their helmets. The twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the devastated landscape. The air still carried traces of ozone and burning metal, a constant reminder of the day's destruction. In the quiet that followed, the reality of their achievement settled over the troops. They had dealt a significant blow to separatist war production, but at tremendous cost. Clone units gathered around small fires, their identical faces reflecting the flickering flames. The silence was broken only by the occasional crackle of comms and distant rumble of collapsing tunnels. Jedi medics moved among the wounded, their healing hands offering what comfort they could. The first major campaign of the Clone Wars had ended, leaving both victors and vanquished forever changed. Geonosis would never recover, its industrial might reduced to memory and ash. But separatists had already fled to darker shadows. Above, Admiral Trench's fleet formed an iron cage of warships, their hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce cities to glass. Separatist blockade runners darted between the capital ships like predatory insects, enforcing the siege with ruthless efficiency. The planet's chime-like sounds, crystals singing in solar winds, formed an eerie counterpoint to the distant rumble of engines. Below, the Senate relief mission hung trapped in orbit, their diplomatic vessel dwarfed by the enemy armada. Holographic distress signals pulsed uselessly into space, absorbed by the blockade's jamming fields. The Republic's response fleet remained light years away, delayed by bureaucratic indecision. Geonosis had become a symbol of isolation, its beauty transformed into a prison. On the planet's surface, crystal formations rose like frozen waves, catching the light in hypnotic patterns. Clone troopers moved cautiously through the prismatic landscape, their white armor stark against the iridescent backdrop. Captain Rex adjusted his helmet's audio sensors, filtering the constant chiming of the crystals to focus on potential threats. "Eyes sharp, men," he whispered into his comm, his breath fogging the visor. This terrain plays tricks with perception. The 501st Legion advanced in formation, their movements precise despite the disorienting environment. Every reflection could hide an enemy, every chime could mask approaching footsteps. The beauty of Geonosis had become a tactical nightmare. The first droid attack came without warning, spider-like droids skittering across crystal surfaces with unnatural speed. Their metallic legs clicked against the formations, creating a discordant symphony that set teeth on edge. Clone troopers dropped into defensive positions, blaster rifles rising as one. The air filled with ozone as energy weapons discharged, beams of light crisscrossing the crystalline landscape. In the Republic Command Center, Jedi General Anakin Skywalker studied tactical holograms with growing frustration. The Senate mission remained trapped in orbit, their pleas for help growing more desperate. "We have to break that blockade," he insisted, his hand hovering above the holographic display. Obi-Wan Kenobi stood beside him, his expression thoughtful but concerned. "Patience, Anakin," he cautioned. "Rushing in will only add to the casualties." Outside, the crystal chiming intensified as solar winds increased, creating an almost hypnotic melody. The sound seemed to mock their predicament, a reminder of the planet's indifference to their struggle. The siege had become a test of endurance as much as tactics. The surface battles grew more intense as separatist forces deployed heavy artillery. Massive cannons carved through crystal formations, sending shockwaves that disoriented clone troopers. The ground trembled with each impact, creating avalanches of glittering shards. Clone medic Kix worked frantically to treat wounded brothers, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and something else, the metallic tang of fear. Sergeant Slick moved among the troops, his demeanor calm but his eyes darting nervously. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead beneath the helmet, betraying an inner turmoil that went beyond battlefield stress. The siege was taking its toll on everyone, but some carried heavier burdens than others. As night fell, Geonosis transformed into a realm of shifting light and shadow. Crystal formations absorbed and reflected the planet's meager starlight, creating an otherworldly landscape. Clone troopers maintained watch rotations, their helmet lamps cutting through the darkness. The constant chiming of the crystals seemed louder in the quiet hours, a reminder of their isolation. In the command tent, Anakin and Obi-Wan reviewed intelligence reports, their faces illuminated by holographic displays. "We've detected a weakness in Trench's blockade pattern," Anakin announced, his voice tight with excitement. "If we can hit that sector simultaneously with ground forces." Obi-Wan nodded slowly, considering the implications of such a risky maneuver. The plan was bold, perhaps reckless, but time was running out. The traitor made his move during the darkest hours of the night. Sergeant Slick moved silently through the clone encampment, his movements practiced and deliberate. He accessed the main power console, his fingers flying across the controls with intimate knowledge. Cold sweat trickled down his spine as he transmitted Republic defense coordinates to the Separatists. The weight of betrayal settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. Above, the Senate mission's ship shuddered as enemy fire found its mark, the result of Slick's sabotage. Alarms blared through the clone camp, rousing troopers from fitful sleep. Slick melted back into the shadows, his heart pounding against his ribs. The siege had claimed another victim, trust itself. Morning revealed the full extent of the betrayal. Clone positions had been precisely targeted. Ammunition stores destroyed, defensive systems compromised. Rex moved through the devastation, his expression grim beneath his helmet. Someone inside gave them everything, he reported to Anakin, his voice tight with suppressed anger. The Jedi General's eyes narrowed, his connection to the Force reaching out to sense deception. The crystal chiming seemed accusatory now, a constant reminder of the breach in their ranks. Clones moved with renewed caution, eyeing each other with suspicion. The isolation of the siege had been compounded by the ultimate violation, betrayal from within. The psychological damage would outlast any physical wound. The Senate relief ship situation grew more desperate by the hour. Their shields fluctuated under sustained bombardment, hull breaches venting atmosphere into space. The crew worked frantically to maintain critical systems, their faces etched with exhaustion. Outside the viewport, Admiral Trench's flagship loomed like a predator, its weapons charging for another volley. The ship's captain made a difficult decision, rerouting power from life support to engines in a desperate escape attempt. The vessel shuddered as it accelerated, pushing against the blockade's gravitational net. For a moment it seemed they might break free, hope flaring among the crew. Then Trench's flagship unleashed its full arsenal, and the relief ship disappeared in a silent explosion. On the surface, the shockwave of the ship's destruction was felt more than heard. Clone troopers paused in their duties, helmets turned skyward as debris rained through the atmosphere. The crystal chiming seemed to falter, as if the planet itself mourned the loss. Anakin Skywalker's face hardened with resolve, his hands clenching into fists. "No more waiting," he declared, his voice cold with determination. Obi-Wan placed a restraining hand on his shoulder, feeling the dark currents rising in his former Padawan. "We strike at dawn," the Jedi Master agreed, his own grief channeled into focus. The siege had claimed another victim, hope itself, but with loss came renewed purpose. The final assault began with the first light of Krustov's binary suns. Clone troopers advanced across the crystal landscape, their movements synchronized and purposeful. Jedi Knights led the charge, lightsabers humming as they deflected incoming fire. The air filled with the sound of battle blaster fire, exploding ordnance, the screams of droids and men alike. Crystals shattered under the onslaught, creating deadly showers of razor-sharp fragments. Rex fought alongside his men, his leadership inspiring them to push forward despite overwhelming odds. The traitor Slick was discovered attempting to flee, his capture bringing a grim satisfaction to the embattled clones. Justice would be served, but it couldn't restore what had been lost. The blockade began to falter as Republic fighters exploited the weakness Anakin had identified. Separatist ships fell one by one, their destruction lighting up the space above Krustov's. Admiral Trench's flagship sustained critical damage, its weapons systems failing under concentrated fire. The crystal chiming seemed to rise in pitch and volume, as if celebrating the Republic's victory. Clone troopers cheered as the last Separatist vessel retreated into hyperspace, leaving the planet's orbit free. The siege was broken, but the cost had been enormous. Wounded brothers were evacuated, their faces pale beneath their helmets. The Senate mission was gone, along with any hope of diplomatic resolution. In the aftermath, Krustov's glittered under twin suns, its beauty restored but forever changed. Clone troopers established defensive positions, their movements automatic despite exhaustion. The crystal chiming continued, a constant reminder of the planet's enduring presence. Anakin Skywalker stood alone on a high ridge, watching the stars where Separatist ships had disappeared. The taste of victory was bitter, mixed with the ashes of failure and betrayal. Obi-Wan approached, placing a hand on his shoulder in silent understanding. Together they watched the horizon, where a new Republic ship was descending through the atmosphere. Its arrival signaled reinforcements, but also something more, something unexpected. A new kind of soldier was about to change everything. The Republic fleet descended like avenging angels through Krustov's atmosphere, their engines roaring defiance against the Separatist siege. Venator-class star destroyers cast enormous shadows across the crystalline landscape, their hulls gleaming in the binary sunlight. Clone troopers cheered as fresh reinforcements poured from landing craft, their armor pristine against the battle-scarred terrain. The air vibrated with the sound of liberation, thunderous engines, celebratory blaster fire, and the planet's own crystalline chiming. Admiral Yularan stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching tactical displays as Republic fighters systematically dismantled the remaining blockade. Krastovsky's prismatic rain began to fall, each droplet catching the light in a miniature rainbow as it struck the ground. The siege was broken, but the planet's surface still bore the wounds of war, shattered crystal formations, scorch marks from blaster fire, and the silent forms of fallen brothers. In the newly established command center, Anakin Skywalker received unexpected news via hologram. Master Yoda's image flickered, his ancient eyes holding both pride and concern. "Time it is, young Skywalker, for your trials to conclude," the small Jedi Master announced. Anakin's breath caught in his throat, years of anticipation crystallizing in this moment. The war had accelerated his journey, bypassing traditional protocols in favor of battlefield necessity. "Return to Coruscant you must," Yoda continued, "for the ceremony cannot wait." Anakin nodded, his mind racing with implications. Knighthood meant independence, responsibility, and leaving behind the identity of Padawan. Outside, the prismatic rain intensified, washing the crystal formations in liquid light. The planet seemed to celebrate his achievement even as the war raged on. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant stood in solemn silence as Anakin approached the Hall of Knighthood. Massive pillars carved from ancient trees lined the chamber, their surfaces etched with the names of Jedi who had come before. 12 masters sat in a semicircle, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of meditation candles. Anakin knelt before them, his mechanical hand resting on his lightsaber hilt. The weapon hummed quietly, a familiar vibration that had become an extension of his own consciousness. Mace Windu's voice resonated through the chamber, formal yet filled with respect. "Anakin Skywalker, you have faced the trials of war and proven yourself worthy of the rank of Jedi Knight." The ceremonial lightsaber passed from master to master, each adding their blessing to its hum. When it finally returned to Anakin's hands, the vibration seemed different, deeper, more resonant, as if acknowledging his new status. Obi-Wan Kenobi watched from the shadows, pride warring with apprehension in his heart. His former Padawan had grown into a powerful Jedi, but the darkness within Anakin remained a concern. The ceremony concluded with Anakin reciting the Jedi Code, his voice steady despite the emotion beneath. As he rose, newly knighted, the temple bells began to toll, their sound echoing across Coruscant's skyline. Outside the chamber, younglings gathered, their eyes wide with admiration for the hero of the Clone Wars. Anakin moved among them, his smile genuine but his thoughts elsewhere, on the battlefield, on Padme, on the weight of expectations now resting squarely on his shoulders. The prismatic reign of Krastovsky seemed a distant memory, replaced by Coruscant's perpetual twilight. Yet the connection remained, a reminder that war waited for no one, not even newly minted Jedi Knights. Meanwhile, on a transport bound for Krastovsky, another journey was underway. Ahsoka Tano sat quietly in the passenger compartment, her young hands fidgeting with her Padawan braid. The Togruta teenager's montrals twitched with every engine vibration, sensing the ship's subtle shifts in momentum. She had been training at the temple for years, but nothing had prepared her for this assignment to the front lines, to a legendary Jedi Knight she'd never met. Master Plo Koon had arranged everything, his parting words echoing in her mind. "Skywalker needs you, young one, though he may not realize it yet." Ahsoka's Leku curled with nervous energy as she studied tactical holograms of Krastovsky. The crystalline planet looked beautiful in the displays, but intelligence reports spoke of brutal combat and heavy losses. She took a deep breath, centering herself as the Jedi had taught her. War was no longer something to read about in history texts. It had become her reality. The transport descended through Krastovsky's atmosphere, encountering the same prismatic rain that had marked Anakin's departure. Ahsoka pressed her face against the viewport, mesmerized by the kaleidoscope of colors. Each droplet struck the transparisteel with a soft chime, creating a symphony that resonated through her montrals. The landing was rough, the pilot navigating through residual turbulence from the recent battle. As the ramp lowered, Ahsoka stepped onto the crystalline surface, her boots crunching on shattered fragments. The air smelled clean and sharp, with undertones of ozone and melted metal. Clone troopers stood at attention, their white armor reflecting the rainbows dancing around them. Ahsoka's mantrals twitched, sensing their curiosity and something else, skepticism about this young Padawan sent to join them. She straightened her shoulders, drawing on the Force to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Anakin Skywalker stood waiting, his newly polished armor gleaming under the binary suns. He had returned from Coruscant only hours before, expecting to resume command without complications. The sight of the young Togruta approaching him brought an immediate frown to his face. "Master Yoda sends his regards," Ahsoka announced, her voice bright with youthful enthusiasm. "And congratulations on your knighthood." Anakin's expression remained unreadable, though his mechanical hand clenched almost imperceptibly. "I don't need a Padawan," he stated flatly, the words hanging in the air between them. Ahsoka's mantrals drooped slightly, her confidence faltering for the first time. The prismatic rain intensified around them, as if the planet itself reacted to their tense encounter. Clone troopers watched from a distance, their helmeted heads turning to observe the exchange. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken history and uncertain futures. That evening in the temporary Jedi quarters, Ahsoka meditated while Anakin reviewed tactical reports. The silence between them was comfortable yet charged with unspoken questions. Ahsoka's mantrals twitched occasionally, sensing her new master's turbulent emotions. Anakin looked up from his datapad, studying the young Togruta in the soft glow of emergency lighting. "Why did you accept this assignment?" he asked suddenly, his curiosity overriding his resistance. Ahsoka opened her eyes, her gaze direct and surprisingly mature. "Because the galaxy needs all the Jedi it can get right now," she answered simply. "And because I believe I can learn from you." The honesty in her response caught Anakin off guard, dismantling some of his defenses. The prismatic rain had stopped completely, leaving the crystal formations to glitter under the starlight. Outside, the sounds of the military camp created a familiar rhythm, distant engines muffled conversations, the occasional blaster test. Within their small sanctuary, a new understanding began to form. The next morning brought renewed separatist activity, testing their fragile new dynamic. Droid forces advanced across the crystal plains, their movements coordinated and relentless. Anakin and Ahsoka moved together instinctively, their lightsabers humming in harmony as they deflected incoming fire. The young Padawan fought with surprising skill, her movements economical yet effective. Anakin found himself adjusting his style to complement hers, a natural synergy developing between them. Clone troopers watched in amazement as the new pair fought back to back, their blue and green lightsabers creating a dazzling display against the crystalline backdrop. The prismatic rain began again, each droplet catching the light of their blades in miniature explosions of color. Ahsoka's mantrals twitched with focus, her connection to the battlefield growing stronger with each passing moment. Anakin felt a strange sense of pride, mixed with apprehension about the responsibility he now carried. The battle raged around them, but in that moment something new and promising was born. As the droid forces retreated, Anakin placed a hand on Ahsoka's shoulder, a gesture of acceptance. "You did well," he acknowledged, his voice softer than before. Ahsoka's mantrals perked up, her leku curling with pleasure at the rare praise. "We make a good team," she observed, her youthful optimism undimmed by the day's violence. Anakin nodded slowly, the weight of his new role settling into place. The prismatic rain intensified, washing the crystal formations in liquid light as if blessing their new partnership. Clone troopers cheered, their respect for the young Padawan growing with each demonstration of her abilities. In the distance, Christoph Cease continued its eternal chiming, a reminder of the planet's enduring presence amid temporary conflicts. The war would continue, battles would be fought, and lives would be lost, but something fundamental had shifted in the Force. A new bond formed, a legacy begun amid the chaos of war. The Master Padawan bond would be tested like never before. The storm-lashed city of Tipoca rose from Kamino's turbulent oceans, like a gleaming needle, its white structures defying the howling winds and salt spray. Inside the sterile training halls, clone cadets moved with mechanical precision, their young faces identical yet somehow distinct. The air hummed with the constant vibration of artificial gravity generators, a sound that had become the rhythm of their existence. Kamino and scientists observed from elevated walkways, their long necks bent over datapads, recording every movement with clinical detachment. Outside, perpetual storms raged, waves crashing against the city's foundations with thunderous force. Salt-laden air seeped through ventilation systems, leaving a faint briny taste on the cadets' lips. The facility felt both womb and prison, nurturing life while preparing it for destruction. This was the cradle of the Republic's army, where millions of lives began as templates and ended as soldiers. Domino squad stood at attention in the zero-G simulation chamber, their magnetic boots locked to the deck plating. Heavy shifted his weight, impatience radiating from his rigid posture. Fives scanned the holographic controls, his mind already calculating strategies. Echo remained perfectly still, his focus absolute, eyes fixed on the distant viewport. The chamber lights dimmed as the simulation began, artificial stars appearing on the ceiling. Cadets, your objective is to retrieve the data module from the derelict vessel, the Kaminoan instructor's voice echoed, devoid of emotion. Gravity disengaged with a sudden lurch, sending the cadets floating into the chamber's center. Their breath came in ragged gasps as they adjusted to the weightlessness, training kicking in despite the disorientation. The simulation vessel materialized before them, a twisted hulk of metal spinning slowly in the void. Heavy launched himself forward, pushing off a bulkhead with reckless speed. Fives followed more cautiously, using controlled bursts from his suit thrusters. Echo positioned himself strategically, analyzing the ship's structural weaknesses. Debris fields appeared suddenly, forcing them to navigate through treacherous obstacles. Heavy clipped a floating girder, sending him tumbling uncontrollably. Fives grabbed his arm, stabilizing them both with practiced efficiency. Echo identified the entry point, his voice calm over the comms despite the chaos. Their movements became a synchronized dance, each cadet compensating for the other's strengths and weaknesses. Inside the derelict, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the corridors. The cadets moved in formation, weapons raised against simulated hostiles. Heavy took point, his aggressive style clearing rooms with brutal efficiency. Fives covered their flank, his movements economical and precise. Echo brought up the rear, his tactical awareness preventing ambushes. The ship groaned around them, adding authenticity to the simulation. They reached the data module just as the ship's integrity began to fail. "Evacuate. Now," Fives commanded, his voice cutting through the alarm sirens. The cadets retreated, their breath coming in short bursts as they raced against the countdown. Back in the gravity chamber, the cadets collapsed onto the deck, muscles trembling with exhaustion. Kaminoan scientists entered, their movements fluid and alien. "Unit performance adequate," one observed, tapping notes into a data pad. Cadet Heavy demonstrates excessive risk-taking tendencies. Heavy glared but remained silent, knowing protest was pointless. Cadet 5 shows promising leadership potential, another scientist continued, studying biometric readouts. Cadet Echo's analytical skills exceed projected parameters. The cadets remained at attention, sweat stinging their eyes, hearts still pounding from the simulation. The scientists' detachment was palpable, their clinical focus reducing life to statistics. In the barracks, Domino squad cleaned their gear with mechanical efficiency. The constant hum of life support systems filled the silence between them. Heavy polished his blaster with unnecessary force, the metal scraping loudly. Fives methodically checked his armor seals, movements precise and economical. Echo sat quietly, reviewing tactical manuals on his datapad. Outside their viewport, Kamino's storms raged, lightning illuminating the churning waves. Salt spray occasionally struck the transparent steel, leaving temporary streaks that vanished quickly. The cadets' breath fogged the cold air as they worked, identical yet uniquely themselves. This moment of quiet preparation contrasted sharply with the chaos of training. The next day brought live fire exercises in the storm simulation chamber. Artificial rain poured from the ceiling, soaking the cadets' fatigues. Wind howled through vents, making communication difficult. Target droids emerged from the mist, their red photoreceptors glowing menacingly. Heavy charged forward, his blaster spitting bolts of energy. Fives provided covering fire, his shots finding critical systems with unerring accuracy. Echo identified patterns in the droid movements, calling out weak points. The chamber echoed with blaster fire and simulated explosions. Cadets slipped on the wet deck, their boots struggling for traction. The Kaminoan observers made notes, unaffected by the dangerous conditions. In the medical bay, cadets received treatments for training injuries. The sterile environment smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Kaminoan medics moved with detached efficiency, treating wounds without emotional engagement. A cadet with a broken arm sat stoically as his bone was reset. Another received treatment for plasma burns, his face pale but composed. The medics discussed cellular regeneration rates as if discussing crop yields. Unit 929887's healing factor exceeds projections by 3.7%, one noted clinically. The cadets remained silent, their eyes fixed on distant points, accepting their condition without question. The hum of medical equipment provided a constant background rhythm. Final evaluations took place in the holographic strategy room. Domino squad stood before a rotating model of a separatist command ship. Your objective is to disable the vessel's primary reactor, the Kaminoan instructor stated flatly. The cadets studied the schematics, their minds working in unison. Heavy proposed a frontal assault, his confidence unwavering. Fives suggested a stealth approach exploiting maintenance corridors. Echo identified structural vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Their debate grew heated, each cadet defending their strategy passionately. The Kaminoans observed, recording their interaction with detached interest. The holographic ship cast shifting blue light across their determined faces. Their breath came faster as the simulation parameters were established. The test began with the cadets infiltrating the virtual ship. They moved through corridors, their movements synchronized despite different approaches. Security droids patrolled the halls, forcing them to take cover. Heavy created a diversion, drawing fire away from the team. Fives disabled security systems with precise shots. Echo navigated the complex layout, finding the most efficient route. They reached the reactor chamber just as alarms blared through the ship. Plant the charges and evacuate, Fives commanded, his voice steady. The cadets worked quickly, their training overriding their fatigue. The virtual explosion shook the chamber as they escaped to safety. After the simulation, the Kaminoan scientists delivered their verdict. Domino squad demonstrates acceptable combat readiness, the lead instructor announced. Recommended for active deployment. The cadets exchanged glances, a mix of pride and apprehension in their eyes. Heavy's jaw tightened with anticipation. Fives nodded slowly, accepting the responsibility. Echo remained composed, his expression unreadable. Outside, the storms intensified, waves crashing against Tipoca's foundations. Salt spray coated the observation windows, blurring the view of the raging ocean. The artificial gravity hum seemed louder suddenly, a constant reminder of their engineered existence. The cadets' breath fogged the cold air as they processed this life-changing news. In their final hours on Kamino, Domino squad prepared for deployment. They packed their gear with practiced efficiency, movement synchronized. The barracks felt different now, charged with impending departure. Heavy checked his heavy weapon, his movements deliberate and confident. Fives reviewed tactical data, his mind already on the battlefield. Echo sat quietly, memorizing squad protocols and contingency plans. Outside, the perpetual storms continued, a fitting backdrop for their transition. The Kaminoan scientists observed their preparations, making final notes on their datapads. Unit cohesion, optimal, one noted clinically. Deployment readiness confirmed. The cadets stood at attention, their identical faces showing unique expressions of determination. Their first real deployment awaited. The marble towers of Malevolence gleamed like teeth against the twilight sky, their polished surfaces reflecting the planet's wealth and arrogance. Banking clans had ruled here for centuries, their influence extending across star systems through credit lines and interest rates. Now those same towers burned, their elegant facades crumbling under separatist assault. Geonosian war machines advanced through financial districts, their spindly legs crushing priceless art and data terminals alike. The air filled with the sound of shattering transparisteel as windows exploded outward, showering streets in razor-sharp fragments. Banking officials fled in panic, their expensive robes torn as they scrambled over debris. The intergalactic banking clan's headquarters became a pyre, marble veins weeping liquid wealth as fire consumed ledgers and credit chips. The economic heart of the Outer Rim was under siege, and its collapse would send shockwaves through the Republic. Republic gunships descended through smoke-choked skies, their ramp doors opening to reveal white-armored clones. Commander Cody surveyed the burning cityscape, his tactical visor filtering thermal signatures through the haze. "Secure the financial district first," he ordered, voice amplified through his helmet. "The banking clan's servers cannot fall into separatist hands." Clone troopers fanned out, moving with practiced precision through streets littered with marble columns and shattered credit terminals. The screaming of droids cut through the chaos as Geonosian battle droids swarmed from hidden alcoves. Their high-pitched death cries echoed off burning buildings, a discordant symphony of mechanical agony. Blaster fire erupted in disciplined patterns, clones advancing behind energy shields as droids fell in sparking heaps. The Geonosian war machines moved like nightmares, given form, their insectoid designs contrasting grotesquely with Malevolence's elegant architecture. Massive reek-like creatures, with mounted cannons trampled through plazas where bankers once conducted billion-credit deals. In the Republic Command Center, Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi studied holographic displays with growing concern. The battle was going well tactically, but intelligence reports suggested something more troubling. "The banking clan appears to be liquidating assets across the sector," he noted, pointing to streams of data. Admiral Tatin stood beside him, his expression calculating rather than compassionate. "Collateral damage, General," the officer replied coolly. "The clans should have considered the risks of aligning with separatists." Outside, another explosion rocked the facility, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Obi-Wan closed his eyes briefly, feeling through the force the panic spreading through the planet's financial networks. Credit markets were freezing, loans defaulting, and the Republic's own war funding was suddenly in jeopardy. The economic contagion had begun. Clone medic Kix moved through a triage area set up in what had once been a prestigious banking hall. Marble floors were stained with bacta and blood, priceless tapestries used as makeshift bandages. Wounded clones lay on cots, fashioned from executive desks, their armor dented and scorched. The air hummed with medical equipment and the occasional moan of pain. Kix worked efficiently, his movements economical as he treated blaster wounds and crush injuries. "This one's stable," he reported to a field droid, gesturing to a clone with a shattered leg plate. "But we're running low on pain suppressants." The field droid whirred in acknowledgement, its mechanical voice devoid of emotion. The contrast between the opulent surroundings and the brutal reality of war was striking, a symbol of how the conflict was consuming everything in its path. As Republic forces pushed deeper into the financial district, the true scale of the economic disaster became apparent. Banking servers had been deliberately corrupted, their data streams replaced with separatist propaganda. Credit verification systems were down, causing chaos in Republic supply lines already stretched thin. Clone troopers discovered vaults that had been emptied, not looted, but methodically stripped by the banking clan itself. "They're burning their own assets to deny them to us," Cody observed, his voice tight with frustration. The screaming of droids intensified as Geonosian reinforcements arrived, their war machines crushing marble columns like dry twigs. Blaster fire illuminated smoke-filled halls, reflecting off shattered transparisteel in dazzling displays of light. The battle raged not just for territory but for the economic future of the galaxy. In the upper levels of the banking clan's headquarters, a desperate defense was underway. Moon bankers in expensive suits manned barricades alongside their security droids. Their faces, usually composed and calculating, now showed panic and betrayal. "We were assured our neutrality would be respected," one banker shouted over the din of battle. His companion clutched a case filled with credit chips, knuckles white with tension. Separatist droids breached their defenses, red photoreceptors scanning for high-value targets. The bankers scattered, some attempting to flee with portable wealth, others simply surrendering. The screaming of droids mixed with human cries as the last bastion of Monalin's financial power fell. Marble columns cracked and fell, taking with them centuries of accumulated wealth and influence. Republic forces finally secured the central financial hub, but victory felt hollow indeed. Clone troopers stood guard among ruins that had once housed trillions in assets. The air still smelled of smoke and ozone, with undertones of melted credits and burning data tapes. Obi-Wan Kenobi walked through the devastation, his Jedi robes incongruous among the shattered remnants of commerce. He paused before a destroyed banking terminal, its screen flickering with corrupted data. "We've won the battle," he said quietly to Cody, "but I fear we've lost something far greater." The clone commander nodded, understanding the unspoken implication. The Republic's financial stability had been dealt a critical blow, one that would resonate far beyond this single planet. In the aftermath, the true economic contagion began to spread. News of Monalin's fall sent shockwaves through markets across the galaxy. Credit lines froze overnight, leaving Republic supply ships stranded without fuel. Trade routes became perilous as insurance rates skyrocketed beyond affordability. The Senate on Coruscant erupted in chaos, senators shouting accusations across the chamber. Chancellor Palpatine appeared before them, his expression grave but his eyes holding a calculating glint. "These are difficult times," he intoned, "requiring difficult measures." His proposal for emergency financial powers met with both support and outrage. The war had claimed a new victim, economic stability, and no one was safe from its effects. Back on Malevolence, the cleanup began amid the ruins. Clone engineers worked to restore basic services, their movements efficient but weary. The remaining Mune citizens watched with hollow eyes, their wealth reduced to rubble and ash. Banking officials who had survived now faced Republic tribunals, their once imposing stature reduced to that of prisoners. The air still carried traces of smoke and the metallic tang of destroyed wealth. Shattered transparent steel crunched under boots as patrols moved through the devastated financial district. Occasionally, the screaming of a damaged droid could still be heard, a haunting reminder of the battle's cost. The Republic had secured the planet, but the economic damage would ripple through the galaxy for years to come. In a quiet corner of the ruined city, Obi-Wan met with Admiral Tarkin to discuss the occupation. The military officer's perspective was pragmatic, focused on strategic advantage rather than humanitarian concerns. The banking clan's assets should be seized immediately, Tarkin insisted, his voice cold and precise. "We cannot allow their resources to be used against us again." Obi-Wan studied the man, sensing the darkness beneath his professional demeanor. The Malevolence moved through space like a predator, its massive hull eclipsing stars as it hunted Republic convoys. Separatist Admiral Trench commanded from the bridge, his tactical mind calculating each strike with cold precision. Republic ships vanished without warning, their last transmissions cut short by the Dreadnought's devastating ion cannons. Only debris fields remained, twisted metal and frozen corpses marking where entire crews had perished. The Republic Navy grew desperate, their usual confidence replaced by whispered fears of this ghost ship. Hyperspace lanes became corridors of terror, as no one knew when the Malevolence would appear next. Its reputation preceded it, a weapon designed not just to destroy ships, but to shatter morale. The technological dread it inspired spread faster than the ship itself. In the Outer Rim, the Jedi Council scrambled to counter this new threat. Master Plo Koon volunteered to lead a task force, his calm demeanor belying his concern. "We must find this vessel before it claims more lives," he, his voice steady over the holographic connection. Anakin Skywalker, ever impatient, demanded immediate action. "We can't just keep reacting to its attacks," he insisted, his mechanical hand clenching unconsciously. The Council debated strategies while reports of new disappearances flooded their comm channels. Each transmission ended abruptly, replaced by static and the haunting sound of dying reactors. The Malevolence had become more than a ship. It was a symbol of Separatist technological superiority, and Admiral Trench was using that symbol to maximum effect. The Dreadnought's latest attack came in the Rhindelia system, targeting a medical convoy. Republic frigates never stood a chance, their shields buckling under the first salvo. Hull groans echoed through doomed ships as metal twisted and buckled under sustained bombardment. Escape pods launched too late, most destroyed before clearing the blast radius. The few survivors spoke of a weapon that seemed alive, its movements too precise for mere droid control. Admiral Trench had perfected his terror tactics, striking where the Republic was most vulnerable. The Malevolence would appear, unleash devastation, then vanish into hyperspace before reinforcements could arrive. Its reign of terror was systematic, calculated, and terrifyingly effective. Jedi Master Plo Koon finally intercepted the Malevolence near the Abrogado system. His fleet engaged the dreadnought, but the battle quickly turned against them. Republic ships crumpled under the massive firepower, their dying reactor screams filling the comm channels. Plo Koon's flagship took direct hits, its bridge exploding in a shower of sparks and shrapnel. The Jedi Master survived, adrift in an escape pod with a handful of clone troopers. They watched helplessly as the Malevolence destroyed their remaining ships, its massive form blotting out the stars. The dreadnought's ion cannons left them powerless, drifting in space with failing life support. Hull groans from their damaged pod became a constant reminder of their vulnerability. Anakin Skywalker received the distress call while stationed on Crustafis. His face hardened with resolve as he ordered immediate preparations for rescue. Ahsoka Tano, his new Padawan, felt his anger through the Force and approached cautiously. Ahsoka Tano, his new Padawan, felt his anger through the Force and approached cautiously. "Master, we need to be careful," she advised, her montrals twitching with concern. Anakin nodded, appreciating her wisdom despite his impatience. They assembled a strike force of elite pilots, including the clone Captain Rex. Their modified fighters were equipped with experimental tracking devices, designed to locate the Malevolence's unique energy signature. The small fleet launched into hyperspace, leaving Crustafis's prismatic surface behind. Their mission was clear: find Plo Koon and destroy the Separatist superweapon. The search led them through the Kaleida Nebula, a swirling mass of colorful gases and electromagnetic interference. Anakin led his squadron through the treacherous space, their fighters dancing between gas clouds and energy discharges. The nebula's beauty contrasted sharply with their grim purpose. "Stay in formation," Anakin ordered over the comm, his voice tense with concentration. Ahsoka followed closely, her smaller fighter weaving through the nebula's currents with surprising agility. Suddenly, proximity alarms blared as the Malevolence emerged from the gaseous haze. Its massive form dwarfed their fighters, its weapons already charging. The dogfight began instantly, Republic starfighters darting like insects around a giant. The battle raged through the nebula, laser fire creating brilliant streaks against the colorful backdrop. Anakin pushed his fighter to its limits, executing maneuvers that would have killed lesser pilots. Ahsoka covered his flank, her movements economical yet effective. Clone pilots followed their lead, their coordination honed by countless training exercises. The Malevolence's point defense systems swatted at them like annoying flies, but the small fighters proved difficult targets. Hull groans from damaged Republic fighters mixed with the dying reactor screams of those less fortunate. The nebula's electromagnetic fields played havoc with sensors, creating a chaotic battlefield where instinct mattered more than technology. Anakin sensed Plo Koon's presence through the Force, guiding them toward the escape pods. Anakin spotted the escape pods and vectored in for rescue. Ahsoka provided cover, her green lasers drawing fire away from her master. Clone fighters formed a protective screen around the recovery operation. Plo Koon and his troopers were brought aboard one by one, their relief palpable even through comm static. With the survivors secured, Anakin turned his attention to the Malevolence itself. "Target the main reactor," he ordered, his voice cold with determination. The Republic fighters concentrated their fire on a single point, their lasers creating a cascade of explosions along the dreadnought's hull. Admiral Trench finally realized his danger, but it was too late. The Malevolence's dying reactor scream echoed through space as its core went critical. The explosion lit up the nebula, a brilliant flash that temporarily outshone the surrounding stars. Debris field expanded rapidly, fragments of the once feared dreadnought scattering in all directions. Republic fighters dodged the larger pieces, their pilots cheering over the comm channels. Anakin allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before turning to more pressing concerns. Ahsoka flew alongside him, her relief mixed with somber reflection on the lives lost. Clone pilots formed up, their formation disciplined despite the adrenaline of victory. The Khalid and Nebula's gases swirled around them, gradually reclaiming the space where the Malevolence had met its end. Whole groans from damaged Republic fighters served as a reminder of the battle's cost. The technological dread had been vanquished, but at a terrible price. In the aftermath, the Republic celebrated the destruction of the Malevolence. News of the victory spread through the fleet, boosting morale across all fronts. Admiral Trench was presumed dead, another Separatist commander fallen to Republic determination. Plo Koon debriefed with Anakin, his gratitude evident but tempered by the losses suffered. "You fought well, Skywalker," the Jedi Master acknowledged, his voice filled with respect. Anakin accepted the praise but remained focused on the larger war. The destruction of one superweapon wouldn't end the conflict, but it proved the Separatists could be beaten. The Republic Navy regained some confidence, their fear replaced by renewed resolve. The technological dread had been lifted, if only temporarily. Yet even as Republic forces regrouped, intelligence reports suggested new threats emerging. Separatist scientists were already developing the next generation of superweapons. The Malevolence had been just the beginning of a technological arms race that would escalate the war to new levels of destruction. Anakin Skywalker sensed this through the Force, a growing darkness on the horizon. He stood alone on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars where the Malevolence had been destroyed. The victory felt hollow somehow, a temporary respite rather than a decisive turning point. The nebula's gases swirled beyond the viewport, beautiful yet menacing in their unpredictability. One superweapon fell, but others stirred. The twin suns of Ryloth beat down on the jungle canopy, creating a humid haze that clung to everything like a second skin. Below, in the ruins of an ancient temple, Jedi Master Tholme moved with cautious grace, his senses stretched to their limits. The air hung thick with the scent of rotting vegetation and something else, darkness that had a physical weight. Tholme's hand rested on his lightsaber hilt, the cool metal a small comfort against the oppressive heat. Shadows danced between crumbling pillars, playing tricks on eyes accustomed to temple lighting. The Jedi Master paused, listening to the jungle sounds that had suddenly fallen silent. Even the insects had ceased their chirping, as if holding their breath in anticipation. Tholme knew then that he was not alone, that the darkness he sensed had taken form. Asajj Ventress emerged from the shadows, her pale skin stark against the dimness of the ruins. Her yellow eyes glowed with predatory intensity, fixed on her prey with unnerving focus. The red lightsaber in her hand cast an eerie crimson glow across the ancient stones. "Master Tholme," she purred, her voice like silk over steel. "Count Dooku sends his regards." Tholme ignited his own lightsaber, the blue blade a stark contrast to her blood-red weapon. The humidity seemed to thicken around them, charged with the energy of their opposing forces. Ventress moved with unnatural speed, her form blurring as she closed the distance between them. Their blades met with a crackle of energy that echoed through the temple ruins. The duel was brutal and personal. Ventress fighting with a ferocity that bordered on madness. Tholme defended with Jedi precision, his movements economical and controlled. Sweat beaded on his brow, mixing with the humid air that already saturated his robes. Ventress laughed, a sound devoid of joy but filled with malice. "The Jedi Order is dying, old man," she taunted, her red saber creating deadly arcs through the air. "Can't you feel it?" Tholme remained focused, his connection to the Force his greatest weapon. The jungle pressed in around them, the rotting vegetation seeming to lean closer to watch the battle. Ancient stones trembled under the impact of their clashing blades. Ventress feinted left, then spun right, with impossible speed. Tholme parried, but her blade slipped past his defenses with surgical precision. The red saber found its mark, piercing the Jedi Master's chest. Tholme gasped, his blue lightsaber deactivating as he fell to his knees. Ventress leaned close, her yellow eyes drinking in his pain. "Your order is already compromised," she whispered, her breath hot against his ear. "Every day, another Jedi falls to our agents." Tholme's last breath escaped him as a sigh, his body crumpling onto the ancient stones. The red saber glow illuminated his face in death, a final insult to his life of service. Ventress stood over him, a triumphant silhouette against the jungle twilight. Meanwhile, on the war-torn planet of Felucia, another Jedi Master walked into a carefully laid trap. Isla Sakira moved through the bioluminescent jungle, her senses alert to the planet's unique dangers. The humidity here was even more oppressive than on Ryloth, the air thick with spores that altered perception. Ahead, the ruins of a Jedi outpost beckoned, its crumbling walls offering temporary shelter. Isla entered cautiously, her hand resting on her lightsaber hilt. The air inside was still, heavy with the scent of decay and abandonment. Suddenly, the entrance sealed behind her, ancient mechanisms grinding into place. Red lightsabers ignited from the shadows, revealing 3 dark Jedi who had been waiting. The ambush was swift and coordinated, the dark Jedi moving with practiced precision. Isla ignited her own lightsabers, twin blue blades casting light against the darkness. The confined space of the ruins worked against her, limiting her mobility. The dark Jedi pressed their advantage, their red sabers creating a deadly web of light. Isla fought with desperate skill, her connection to the Force her only advantage. The humid air grew charged with dark side energy, making it difficult to breathe. Ancient stones trembled under the impact of their battle, dust and debris raining down. Isla knew she was outmatched, that this had been designed specifically to kill her. On Coruscant, Senator Amidala moved through the lower levels, following a tip about separatist collaborators. The air here was recycled and stale, carrying the scent of too many bodies in confined spaces. She entered a cantina where the shadows seemed to have physical weight. At a corner table, a pirate captain waited, his face scarred and his eyes calculating. "Senator," he greeted, his voice rough from cheap liquor and cheaper living. "You're looking for information that could get you killed." Padme slid into the booth, her elegant clothing incongruous in the seedy establishment. The pirate slid a data pad across the table, his fingers lingering on it for a moment. "Names, dates, locations," he said quietly. "The separatists have friends in high places." Back on Felucia, Isla Sakura found an opening in the Dark Jedi's defense. She used the Force to push debris toward her attackers, creating a momentary distraction. The Dark Jedi scattered, their coordination broken for a crucial second. Isla seized the opportunity, her blue lightsabers moving in a deadly arc. One Dark Jedi fell, then another, their red sabers deactivating as they died. The third fled into the jungle, leaving Isla alone in the ruined outpost. She sank to her knees, exhaustion and relief warring within her. The humid air pressed in around her, the jungle sounds slowly returning. She had survived, but the knowledge of how close she had come to death remained. In the Sith temple on Coruscant's forgotten levels, Darth Sidious watched holographic reports of his agents' activities. The red glow of holographic displays cast demonic shadows across his features. Dooku stood beside him, his expression satisfied with the progress of their plan. "The Jedi Order grows weaker with each passing day," Dooku observed, his voice smooth as poison. Sidious nodded, his fingers steepled before him. "Our web extends throughout the galaxy," he replied, his voice a dry rasp. "Warlords, pirates, corrupted officials, all serve our purpose without even knowing it." The temple around them seemed to pulse with dark energy, responding to their presence. The corruption they had sown was bearing fruit, weakening the Republic's foundations. On the Jedi temple world of Ossus, masters gathered to discuss the growing number of Jedi deaths. The council chamber was solemn, filled with the weight of their losses. Master Yoda closed his eyes, feeling the disturbance in the Force like a physical blow. "A pattern, there is," he said, his voice heavy with age and sorrow. "Not random attacks, these are." Mace Windu nodded, his jaw tight with frustration. "The Sith are picking us off one by one," he stated grimly. "They're targeting our most experienced masters, leaving our ranks vulnerable." The other masters exchanged concerned glances, understanding the implications. The Jedi Order bled from 1,000 cuts. The blockade above Ryloth formed a cage of durasteel and energy, separatist warships hanging like vultures in the ochre sky. Below, the planet's surface withered under the siege, fertile fields turning to dust and rivers shrinking to muddy trickles. Twi'lek citizens moved through occupied streets with hollow eyes, their once vibrant blue skin now grayed by malnutrition and despair. Droid patrols marched in perfect synchronization, their red photoreceptors scanning for any sign of rebellion. The air tasted of ash and ozone, carrying the constant thrum of distant engines. In the capital city of Lesu, separatist flags hung from crumbling buildings, symbols of a subjugation that felt eternal. The blockade had transformed Ryloth from a thriving homeworld into a prison, its people slowly starving under the watchful eyes of their mechanical jailers. Deep within the planet's cave networks, Cham Syndola moved like a shadow through winding passages. His freedom fighters gathered around makeshift tables, their faces illuminated by the glow of stolen power cells. The droids tightened their grip daily. Cham stated, his voice rough but determined, "Our supplies dwindle while our people starve." A young fighter named Numa adjusted her blaster, her montrals twitching with nervous energy. "We hit their supply convoy last night," she reported, pride warring with exhaustion. "Took enough rations to feed 3 villages for a week." The cave echoed with murmurs of approval, the sound bouncing off mineral-rich walls. Cham nodded, but his eyes remained shadowed with the weight of leadership. Every raid brought temporary relief but drew more droid attention to their hidden sanctuaries. Above the planet, Jedi Master Mace Windu studied tactical holograms aboard the Republic flagship. The situation on Ryloth grew more desperate by the hour, with separatist forces systematically crushing resistance. "We must break this blockade," Windu declared, his voice cutting through the bridge's ambient noise. Admiral Tarkin stood beside him, his expression calculating rather than compassionate. "The strategic value of Ryloth is minimal, Master Jedi." The officer countered coolly. "We should prioritize targets with greater military significance." Windu turned his full attention to Tarkin, his presence suddenly filling the space with quiet intensity. "The Republic does not abandon its allies," he stated, leaving no room for debate. The Admiral stiffened but remained silent, recognizing the finality in the Jedi's tone. The blockade would be broken, not for strategy but for principle. The Republic assault began with thunderous force. Gunships descending through Ryloth's turbulent atmosphere. Clone troopers poured onto the surface, their white armor instantly coated in the planet's distinctive red dust. The Separatists responded with heavy artillery, sending shockwaves through the canyons. Blaster fire echoed off rock walls, creating a deafening symphony of war. Windu moved among the clones, his purple lightsaber a beacon of hope amid the chaos. "Secure the high ground," he commanded, his voice carrying over the din of battle. Clone Commander Pons relayed orders with military precision, coordinating squads through the treacherous terrain. In the mountains, Cham Syndola's fighters emerged from their caves to join the Republic offensive. They moved with intimate knowledge of the terrain, guiding clones through hidden passes and ambush points. Numa fought alongside a clone squad, her smaller stature allowing her to navigate spaces droids couldn't reach. The combined forces pushed toward Lesu, their progress measured in hard-won meters rather than kilometers. Droid reinforcements arrived in waves, their mechanical forms advancing relentlessly across the rocky landscape. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and burnt flesh, a constant reminder of the battle's cost. Windu and Cham fought back-to-back at one point, their different styles complementing each other surprisingly well. The Jedi's precision strikes and the Twi'lek's guerrilla tactics created a deadly combination against their common enemy. As they approached Lesu, the Republic forces encountered a Lerman village nestled in a protected valley. The pacifist beings had remained neutral throughout the occupation, their simple existence a stark contrast to the surrounding violence. Their chants drifted through the valley, haunting melodies that spoke of peace and resilience. Windu paused, respecting their desire to remain uninvolved in the conflict. Cham, however, saw opportunity in their position. "The droids will use this valley to flank us," he warned, gesturing toward strategic high ground. The Lerman elder approached, his staff tapping softly on the stone path. "We will not fight," he stated firmly, "but neither will we hinder your passage." Windu nodded in understanding, appreciating their commitment to their principles even in wartime. The turning point came when Republic bombers finally broke through the remaining blockade ships. Their payload struck separatist positions with devastating accuracy, turning the tide of the ground battle. Droid forces began to retreat, their programming prioritizing self-preservation over holding territory. Cham and Windu pressed their advantage, driving the remaining mechanical soldiers toward the spaceport. The citizens of Lesu poured into the streets, their cheers mixing with the sounds of continuing combat. Blue faces, once gray with hunger, now flushed with the hope of liberation. Clone medics moved through the crowds, treating both soldiers and civilians with equal care. The dust storms began to subside, revealing a city scarred but not broken. In the aftermath, the true cost of occupation became visible. Bodies lay in the streets, both droid and living, a grim testament to the battle's intensity. Twi'lek families searched for missing loved ones, their calls echoing through damaged buildings. The Jedi Temple stood as a beacon of tranquility on Coruscant, its spires piercing the planet's perpetual twilight. Within its hallowed halls, the air hummed with centuries of accumulated wisdom, each stone whispering secrets of the Force. Jedi Masters moved in silent meditation, their presence a calming influence on the temple's atmosphere. The archives, in particular, held a sacred weight, knowledge preserved through generations, protected by both physical barriers and spiritual reverence. No one suspected that darkness had already breached these defenses, slithering through shadows like oil on water. The Force itself seemed restless, a subtle tremor running through its normally steady currents. Whispers of long-dead Jedi echoed in empty corridors, their spectral voices warning of approaching danger. Yet the living remained oblivious, their trust in the temple's inviolability absolute. Cad Bane moved through the lower levels like a wraith, his Duros physiology perfectly adapted to the temple's dim lighting. His red eyes glowed with predatory intelligence as he navigated security systems with practiced ease. The bounty hunter's raspy breath cut through the silence, a harsh counterpoint to the temple's usual tranquility. He bypassed laser grids and pressure plates, his movements economical and precise. Each step brought him closer to the Jedi's most precious artifacts, holocrons containing knowledge deemed too dangerous for general access. Bane's gloved fingers traced the cold surface of a wall panel, disabling alarms with a few deft adjustments. The air grew colder around him as if the temple itself recoiled from his presence. Whispers of Force ghosts intensified, their spectral forms flickering at the edge of his vision. In the archives, Jedi librarian Jocasta Nu sensed the disturbance first. She paused in her cataloging, frowning as the Force whispered warnings of intrusion. The ancient texts around her seemed to hum with agitation, their energy fields fluctuating unnaturally. Jocasta moved toward the restricted section, her steps quickening with growing concern. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and something else, darkness that had a physical weight. As she rounded a corner, she caught sight of movement in the shadows. "Intruder," she called out, her voice echoing through the silent halls. The response came not in words but in the distinctive snap hiss of a lightsaber. Ahsoka Tano, drawn by the disturbance, had arrived. Ahsoka faced Cad Bane across the archive's central chamber, her green lightsaber casting an emerald glow on ancient texts. The bounty hunter regarded her with cool amusement, his hand resting on his blaster pistol. "The little Padawan," he rasped, his voice like gravel scraping against metal. "I expected more resistance from the Jedi Order." Ahsoka fell into a defensive stance, her montrals twitching as she assessed the situation. The mirrored walls of the chamber created infinite reflections, turning the room into a disorienting labyrinth. "You won't leave here with that holocron," she declared, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Bane laughed, a dry sound that seemed to absorb the light around them. The whispers of Force ghosts grew louder, their spectral forms appearing between the endless reflections. The confrontation erupted into motion, Bane drawing his blasters with lightning speed. Ahsoka deflected his shots with practiced precision, her lightsaber creating a shield of green light. The mirrored walls multiplied their images, creating a dizzying display of combat that seemed to extend into infinity. Bane moved with unnatural agility, his Duros physiology allowing him to scale walls and cling to ceilings. Ahsoka pursued, her connection to the Force guiding her through the disorienting maze. The bounty hunter's raspy breath echoed through the chamber, a constant reminder of his presence. Meanwhile, in the Senate Rotunda, panic spread like wildfire. News of the temple breach had reached the politicians, their usual decorum replaced by shouts and accusations. Chancellor Palpatine appeared before them, his expression grave but his eyes holding a calculating glint. "The Jedi Temple has been violated," he announced, his voice carrying across the chamber. Senators erupted in chaos, their voices merging into a cacophony of fear and outrage. Bail Organa stood, demanding answers that no one could provide. The temple's inviolability had been a cornerstone of Republic security. Its breach suggested vulnerabilities no one wanted to acknowledge. Coruscant's underbelly had been exposed, revealing a network of criminal elements willing to strike at the heart of the Jedi Order. The Senate's panic mirrored the city's growing unease. Back in the temple, Ahsoka cornered Bane near the holocron vault. The bounty hunter stood between her and his prize, his blasters raised and ready. "You Jedi are so predictable," he rasped, his red eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. "Always protecting your secrets at the cost of everything else." Ahsoka advanced slowly, her lightsaber humming with contained energy. The mirrored walls reflected their standoff infinitely, creating an army of light and dark. The whispers of Force ghosts reached a crescendo, their spectral forms nearly solid in their agitation. Bane's breath came in ragged gasps, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense silence. The air crackled with energy, charged by their opposing forces. The sacred space around them seemed to recoil from the violence being enacted within its walls. The final confrontation was brutal and brief. Bane feinted left, then spun right with impossible speed. Ahsoka anticipated the move, her green blade intercepting his blaster fire. The bounty hunter activated a smoke bomb, filling the chamber with obscuring clouds. Ahsoka relied on the Force, her senses guiding her through the darkness. She heard Bane's raspy breath to her right and struck, her lightsaber finding its mark. The bounty hunter cried out in pain and surprise, dropping one of his blasters. The smoke cleared to reveal him clutching a wounded arm, his usual composure replaced by fury. The holocron lay exposed on its pedestal, pulsing with inner light. The Force ghosts wailed as Bane made a desperate lunge for the artifact. Ahsoka moved with Jedi speed, intercepting Bane before he could reach the holocron. Their struggle sent them crashing into a display case, ancient artifacts shattering around them. The bounty hunter's rasping breath came in short gasps as he fought with desperate strength. Ahsoka pinned him, her knee pressing into his back as she secured his wrists. The mirrored walls reflected their struggle endlessly, a kaleidoscope of light and dark locked in combat. The whispers of Force ghosts subsided, their spectral forms fading as the immediate danger passed. Temple guards arrived, their expressions grim as they took custody of the intruder. Bane was dragged away, his red eyes burning with promised revenge. The holocron remained safe, but the violation of the temple's sanctity could not be undone. In the aftermath, the Jedi Order closed ranks around its wounded pride. Masters moved through the archives with heavy hearts, assessing the damage to both physical artifacts and spiritual integrity. The whispers of Force ghosts continued, a constant reminder of the darkness that had penetrated their sanctuary. Ahsoka stood before the council, her report delivered with quiet dignity. The Masters exchanged concerned glances, understanding that this breach represented something more than a simple theft. The Senate's panic had not subsided, with politicians demanding increased security measures. Coruscant's underbelly had been exposed, revealing a network of criminal elements operating with impunity. The temple's sacred spaces had been defiled, their inviolability proven to be an illusion. The enemy walked where angels feared. The chrome towers of Sundari pierced Mandalore's bruised sky, their reflective surfaces mirroring both the planet's troubled past and its uncertain future. Duchess Satine Kryze moved through the gleaming corridors of her palace, her footsteps echoing with the weight of 1,000 impossible choices. Outside, the city pulsed with nervous energy, its citizens clinging to pacifist ideals, while violence brewed in the shadows. The air tasted of recycled air, and something else, fear sharp and metallic, coating the tongue. Satine paused before a vast mural depicting Mandalore's peaceful reformation, its vibrant colors now seeming naive against the gathering darkness. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted the collar of her formal robes, the fine fabric feeling like a shroud. The new Mandalorian movement she championed stood on the brink of collapse, its foundations eroded by decades of resentment. In the distance, the distinctive roar of jetpack engines cut through the city's hum, a reminder that peace had never been fully accepted. Vizsla watched from his hidden fortress, the black armor of Deathwatch absorbing the dim light. His warriors moved like ghosts through the Undercity, their movements synchronized and deadly. "The Duchess grows weak," Vizsla stated, his voice carrying the gravelly weight of command. "Her pacifism has made us vulnerable, made Mandalore a joke." His lieutenant, Bo-Katan, nodded sharply, her helmet tucked under one arm. "The people remember our warrior heritage," she countered, her eyes burning with conviction. "They crave strength, not weakness." Vizsla's smile, a predator's expression devoid of warmth. The air around them smelled of ozone from charging weapons and the acrid tang of ambition. Jetpack fumes hung heavy in their command center, a constant reminder of their readiness for violence. In Sundari's central plaza, a peace rally turned tense as Deathwatch sympathizers emerged from the crowds. Their black-clad forms stood in stark contrast to the colorful garments of new Mandalorian supporters. Shouts escalated into shoving, then into blaster fire that echoed off chrome towers. Satine's security forces moved to intervene, their non-lethal weapons struggling against determined militants, the air filled with the stench of burned fabric and the coppery scent of fear. A mural depicting unity between clans shattered under a stray blast, its painted fragments raining down like broken promises. Citizens scattered, their pacifist ideals crumbling under the reality of violence. The plaza became a microcosm of Mandalore's fracture, ideals colliding with brutal force. Obi-Wan Kenobi arrived on Mandalore as Republic envoy, his Jedi robes incongruous against the city's sterile modernity. He found Satine in her private gardens, the engineered plants struggling under the planet's harsh sun. "The Senate grows concerned," he said gently, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken history. Satine turned, her eyes holding depths of exhaustion he hadn't seen before. "Concern is not intervention, Obi-Wan," she replied, her voice tight with controlled frustration. The air between them crackled with unresolved tension, memories of a past that could never be reclaimed. Outside, jetpacks streaked across the sky as Deathwatch conducted another show of force. The fumes drifted into the garden, tainting the carefully cultivated air. Obi-Wan sensed the darkness growing, a cancer spreading through Mandalore's body politic. The Republic Senate debated Mandalore's fate with characteristic vehemence. Senators shouted across the chamber, their voices merging into meaningless noise. Chancellor Palpatine listened with apparent patience, his fingers steepled before him. "Mandalore's neutrality has been a cornerstone of galactic stability," Bail Organa argued, his voice cutting through the chaos. "But neutrality becomes complicity when genocide threatens." Opposing senators countered with fears of escalation, of opening another front in an already devastating war. The air in the Senate chamber grew thick with recycled air and hotter tempers. Holographic displays showed Sundari's chrome towers burning in places, the visual evidence making abstract debates painfully real. The Republic faced an impossible choice: intervene and potentially ignite a wider conflict, or stand by and watch a civilization tear itself apart. Back on Mandalore, Deathwatch launched a coordinated attack on Satine's palace. Jetpacks screamed through the corridors, their fumes choking the filtered air. Satine's guards fought valiantly, but were overwhelmed by the ferocity of the assault. The Duchess stood her ground in the throne room, her refusal to carry a weapon a final act of defiance. Vizsla confronted her, his dark saber humming with malevolent energy. "Your peace has brought us nothing but weakness," he declared, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Satine met his gaze without flinching, her dignity intact even in defeat. The air crackled between them, ideologies clashing like physical forces. Outside, more peace murals shattered under explosive charges, their painted fragments scattering like broken dreams. Obi-Wan fought his way through the palace, his blue lightsaber a beacon of hope amid the chaos. Clone troopers had finally arrived as reinforcements, their white armor stark against the palace's elegant decor. "Secure the Duchess," he commanded, his voice carrying over the din of battle. The clones moved with disciplined efficiency, their training overcoming the disorienting effects of jetpack fumes. Death Watch warriors fell back, their surprise attack having failed to achieve its primary objective. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and burned armor. Obi-Wan reached Satine's side just as Vizsla retreated, their eyes locking across the chamber. The moment held centuries of history, of love and loss, of paths that could never be reconciled. The ideological war had become personal, its cost measured in more than just political terms. In the aftermath, Sundari's chrome towers bore scars that mirrored Mandalore's fractured soul. Repair droids moved through damaged corridors, their mechanical efficiency unable to heal deeper wounds. Satine addressed her people via hologram, her face pale but resolute. "We will not abandon our principles," she declared, her voice carrying across the wounded city. Mandalore deserves better than endless cycles of violence. Yet even as she spoke, Death Watch regrouped in the shadows, their influence spreading like poison through the populace. The Republic's presence brought temporary security but also complicated Mandalore's claim to neutrality. Jetpack fumes still lingered in the upper levels of the city, a constant reminder that peace remained fragile. The shattered peace murals lay unrepaired, their broken pieces too painful to reassemble. The Jedi Council debated the implications of Mandalore's crisis via hologram. Yoda's ears drooped with concern as he felt the darkness spreading through the Force. "A mirror to our own conflict, this is," he observed, his voice heavy with ancient wisdom. Mace Windu nodded, his expression grim. "Ideological warfare is the most dangerous kind. It turns brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor." The Council understood that Mandalore's fate would ripple across the galaxy, influencing countless other worlds teetering between neutrality and allegiance. The Republic's intervention had set a precedent, one that could either stabilize the region or ignite wider conflict. The air in the Council chamber seemed to thicken with the weight of their decision. Mandalore's civil war had become a microcosm of the larger galactic struggle. As night fell on Sundari, the chrome towers reflected the planet's wounded moons. Satine stood alone on her balcony, watching as repair crews worked through the darkness. The jetpack fumes had dissipated, but their memory lingered in the cold air. The zombie forests of Dathomir breathed with ancient life, twisted trees clawing at a sky permanently bruised purple. Green mist coiled around gnarled roots like serpents, glowing with bioluminescent energy that pulsed in time with distant drums. Nightsisters moved through the haze, their bare feet silent on moss-covered stones. Bone charms clinked softly against their ritual garments, each fragment carrying the spirit of a long-dead warrior. The air hummed with whispers, not words but impressions of hunger and power that seeped into the bone. Mother Talzin led the coven to the heart of the forest, where the veil between worlds grew thin. Her staff, topped with a glowing skull, cast eerie shadows across their painted faces. The very earth seemed to vibrate beneath them, responding to the dark magic gathering like storm clouds. Count Dooku watched from the edge of the clearing, his Sith robes stark against the primal chaos. Disdain warred with necessity in his expression as the Nightsisters began their ritual. Green mist thickened, forming swirling vortexes that revealed glimpses of screaming spirits. Talzin raised her arms, her voice rising in a guttural chant that made the air itself tremble. Bone charms rattled violently, their spirit inhabitants responding to her call. Dooku felt the dark side surge through him, wild, untamed, and utterly alien to Sith precision. "Your magic is impressive," he acknowledged, his voice cutting through the ritual's crescendo. Talzin turned, her eyes glowing with spectral fire. "It is power you cannot control, Sith Lord," she replied, her smile sharp as broken glass. The alliance had been forged in desperation, with Dooku seeking warriors who could strike where droids could not. Talzin demanded secrets of the dark side in exchange for her witch's service. Now, as the ritual reached its peak, spirit whispers coalesced into physical forms. Translucent warriors materialized from the mist, their hollow eyes fixed on Dooku with ancient hunger. The Sith Lord maintained his composure, though his hand drifted toward his lightsaber. "They hunger for Force energy," Talzin explained, her voice dripping with malicious amusement. "Your fear is particularly nourishing." Dooku's expression hardened, his pride warring with practicality. The spirits circled closer, their whispers rising to a fever pitch. Bone charms clinked wildly as the Nightsisters channeled their power. In the Separatist command center, General Grievous monitored the ritual via hologram with mechanical impatience. His metallic fingers tapped against the console, creating a rhythm devoid of life. "The witches are unreliable," he growled, his voice modulated, distorting the words. Dooku's image flickered, his expression unreadable. "They serve their purpose, General," the Sith Lord replied coolly. For now, the hologram showed the green mist swirling violently as spirits manifested. Grievous watched with cold fascination, his multiple optics recording every detail. The Nightsisters' magic represented something his droid armies could never replicate: unpredictable organic power. Yet it also made them dangerous variables in Dooku's calculations. The general's arms crossed over his chest plates, a gesture of contained frustration. Days later, Separatist warships descended upon Dathomir, their engines scorching the sacred forests. Laser fire carved through ancient trees, turning millennia of growth into ash in seconds. The Nightsisters emerged from their hidden temples, their faces painted for battle. Bone charms clinked as they raised their hands, calling forth green mist to shield their lands. The Separatist droids advanced relentlessly, their red photoreceptors glowing with mechanical purpose. Talzin stood at the forefront, her staff glowing with dark energy. "You have broken our pact, Dooku," she screamed into the chaos, her voice carrying over the sounds of destruction. The Sith Lord watched from orbit, his expression cold as space. The Nightsisters had become a liability, their wild magic too unpredictable for his plans. The battle raged through the zombie forests, ancient magic clashing with cold technology. Nightsisters rode rancors into battle, their mounts roaring with primal fury. Green mist coiled around Separatist droids, corroding their metal bodies like acid. Laser fire cut through the haze, creating deadly beams of red light. Spirit whispers rose to screams as the dead were disturbed by the violence. Talzin dueled with Grievous, her magic pitted against his 4 lightsabers. Bone charms shattered under the impact of energy blades, releasing their spirits in bursts of green light. The very earth seemed to cry out as sacred grounds were violated. Ancient trees fell, their roots torn from soil that had nourished them for centuries. Dooku observed the destruction with clinical detachment, his mind already calculating the next move. The Nightsisters' power was impressive, but ultimately chaotic, undisciplined. Their defeat would serve as a warning to others who might challenge Sith authority. Yet even as he watched, something unexpected happened. The green mist began to coalesce into physical forms. Spirit warriors materialized in mass, their translucent bodies solidifying into terrifying reality. The Separatist droids faltered, their programming unable to comprehend such supernatural threats. Grievous roared in frustration as his forces began to fall back. Talzin laughed, the sound echoing through the burning forest. "You cannot kill what is already dead, Sith," she shouted toward the sky. In a desperate move, Dooku ordered the orbital bombardment of the Nightsisters' stronghold. Lasers rained from the sky, scorching the sacred temple and surrounding forests. The green mist dissipated under the intense heat, spirit warriors screaming as they were forced back to the realm of the dead. Talzin cried out in rage and pain as her home was destroyed around her. Bone charms shattered, their spirits released in one final burst of energy. The Separatist droids advanced into the chaos, their red photoreceptors scanning for survivors. The Nightsisters who remained fought with desperate fury, their magic fueled by grief and rage. Spirit whispers faded to nothing as the ancient powers were forced into retreat. The zombie forests burned, their ancient trees reduced to smoldering husks. Magic and machines collided in fire. The wind howled across the memorial field on Coruscant, carrying the metallic chime of thousands of dog tags strung between makeshift poles. Each tag represented a brother lost, a name etched in durasteel that caught the weak sunlight. Clone troopers stood in silent ranks, their white armor dull under the overcast sky. The sound was a constant, mournful chorus, tags clinking together like ghostly voices in the breeze. Captain Rex moved among them, his fingers tracing the cold metal of a tag marked 5s. The weight of each loss settled on his shoulders, heavier than any armor. Tear tracks glistened on the inside of his helmet. Hidden from view but felt in every breath, the field stretched endlessly, a sea of grief made tangible. On Crosstifsis, night fell like a shroud over the crystal landscape. Jedi pyres burned in solemn rows, their flames casting long shadows across the prismatic ground. The heat radiated outward, a physical manifestation of the lives extinguished. Obi-Wan Kenobi stood before one pyre, his face illuminated by the flickering light. The scent of burning wood and incense mingled with the planet's natural crystal chime. Anakin Skywalker watched from a distance, his expression unreadable but his posture rigid with pain. Padme Amidala placed a flower on a pyre, her movements slow and reverent. The fires crackled softly, a counterpoint to the silence of the gathered mourners. In a dimly lit command tent, Rex and Cody sat hunched over datapads. The glow of the screens illuminated their weary faces, highlighting the strain in their eyes. Casualty reports scrolled endlessly. Names, numbers, circumstances of death. Cody rubbed his temples, the weight of each entry pressing down on him. Another squad lost near Ryloth, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Rex nodded, his fingers pausing over a familiar designation. Echo's unit, he murmured, the name catching in his throat. The tent felt suffocating, the air thick with unspoken grief and duty. The memorial service on Coruscant continued as clones stepped forward to add tags. Each movement was precise, military discipline overriding raw emotion. A young trooper approached the central pole, his hands trembling as he hung a tag marked heavy. The wind caught it immediately, sending it swinging against its neighbors with a sharp clink. Tears streamed freely down his face now, leaving streaks on his helmet's interior. No one moved to comfort him. This was a burden each carried alone. The field seemed to absorb their sorrow, the tags becoming a chorus of the fallen. Back on Crosstifsis, the Jedi pyres burned lower, their flames consuming the last remnants of physical form. Master Yoda walked among them, his small stature seeming even more diminished by grief. He paused before each pyre, placing a hand on his heart in silent blessing. The heat still radiated, but now it felt like a fading memory rather than a living presence. Ahsoka Tano stood with Anakin, her montrals drooping with sorrow. She had lost mentors, friends, pieces of her new life as a Padawan. The crystal chime of Crosstifsis seemed softer now, as if mourning alongside them. In the command tent, Cody finally set his datapad aside. The glow left his face, leaving it shadowed and older than his years. "How many more, Rex?" he asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Rex didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on a point beyond the tent flap. "Too many," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. The weight of command pressed down on them both, the responsibility for lives, the burden of reporting their ends. Outside, the sounds of the camp continued, movement, machinery, the relentless rhythm of war. Inside, only the hum of the datapads and the sound of their breathing remained. The Coruscant Memorial Field emptied slowly as clones returned to their duties. The dog tags continued their endless chiming, a constant reminder of sacrifice. Rex remained behind, his hand resting on the tag marked 5s. The wind had died down, but the tags still moved slightly, as if animated by unseen hands. He closed his eyes, seeing his brother's face in his mind, smiling, confident, alive. The memory was both comfort and agony, a reminder of what had been lost. Tear tracks had dried on his cheeks, leaving behind a tight, uncomfortable feeling. The field felt alive with the presence of the fallen, their spirits lingering among the tags. In the command center, Rex and Cody prepared for the next briefing. The casualty reports were filed, the dead accounted for, the living tasked with carrying on. Cody adjusted his helmet, his movements automatic, practiced. Rex followed suit, the weight of his own helmet feeling heavier than usual. The interior still bore the faint traces of tear tracks, a private testament to their grief. Outside, the camp stirred to life, the sounds of preparation replacing the quiet of the night. They had a duty to perform, brothers to lead, a war to fight. The burden of sacrifice was theirs to bear, now and always. The Coruscant Memorial Field stood empty now, but the dog tags continued their endless song. The wind picked up again, carrying the chime across the military complex. Clone troopers paused in their duties, listening to the haunting melody. Each tag represented a story, a life cut short, a sacrifice made. The field had become a sacred space, a testament to the cost of war. Rex stood at the edge, watching as new tags were added to the collection. The cycle continued, each loss adding to the weight they all carried. Every loss fueled the darkness. The Techno-Union's re-invasion of Ryloth began at dawn, their warships descending like locusts upon the newly liberated world. Droid armies poured from landing craft, their metallic forms advancing across the dust-choked canyons. The air filled with the familiar stench of ozone and burning rock, a scent the Twi'leks had hoped never to smell again. Cham Syndulla's freedom fighters scrambled to defensive positions, their expressions grim with recognition. "They never learn," Muma muttered, checking her blaster with practiced efficiency. The droids marched in perfect synchronization, their red photoreceptors scanning for resistance. Republic forces, still celebrating their victory, were caught off guard by the sudden assault. The sound of blaster fire echoed once more through Ryloth's wounded landscape. Meanwhile, in the Rodia system, pirate raiders descended upon refugee convoys like vultures. Sullustan ships, overloaded with civilians fleeing the Outer Rim conflicts, struggled to evade the faster pirate vessels. The pirates' modified freighters bore crude weapons, their hulls scarred from countless illegal operations. Evasive maneuvers. "Now!" the Sullustan captain shouted, his voice strained with panic. Refugee ships groaned under the strain of sudden course changes, their engines whining in protest. Children cried in the crowded holds, their small faces pressed against viewports, showing the approaching pirates. The pirates' boarding parties cut through airlocks with plasma torches, their laughter carrying across the comm channels. The Sullustan crew prepared to make their final stand, knowing surrender meant slavery or death. Republic fleets redeployed across the rim, moving like chess pieces on a galactic board. Star destroyers changed course mid-hyperspace, their navigational computers calculating new trajectories. Clone pilots reviewed mission briefings in crowded briefing rooms, their faces illuminated by holographic displays. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," Admiral Yularen announced, his image flickering with static. "We must reinforce Ryloth while protecting refugee corridors." The strategic map showed a web of conflict spreading like cancer through the Outer Rim. Fleet commanders made difficult choices, knowing every deployment left another sector vulnerable. The war's frontiers expanded daily, consuming new worlds with terrifying speed. In the asteroid fields near Ryloth, Republic cruisers navigated treacherous paths to avoid Techno-Union patrols. Massive rocks scraped against hulls, sending vibrations through entire ships. "Steady as she goes," the helmsman commanded, his hands white-knuckled on the controls. Clone gunners manned turbo-laser batteries, tracking potential threats through the swirling debris. The sound of metal grinding against rock set teeth on edge throughout the vessels. Small fighters weaved between larger asteroids, their pilots pushing the limits of their skills. A sudden collision sent shockwaves through the fleet, debris showering smaller ships. The asteroid field became both shield and trap, a deadly maze that claimed ships from both sides. The refugee crisis worsened as more worlds fell to separatist forces. Overcrowded space stations struggled to process the endless stream of displaced beings. Medical teams worked around the clock, treating injuries and malnutrition among the newcomers. "We're running out of supplies," a medical droid reported, its voice devoid of emotion but conveying urgency. Refugee ships continued to arrive, their hulls groaning from the stress of long journeys through dangerous space. Families huddled together in temporary shelters, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Republic officials tried to maintain order, but the sheer scale of the crisis overwhelmed their resources. The war's endless frontiers kept expanding, creating new refugees with each passing day. Republic intelligence reports painted a grim picture of the Rim's deteriorating situation. Holographic displays showed system after system falling to separatist control. "They're exploiting our stretched forces," a clone analyst observed, pointing to patterns in the data. The separatists had adopted a new strategy, rapid strikes that forced constant redeployment of Republic assets. Each time the Republic reinforced one position, 3 more came under attack. Clone commanders worked without rest, their faces gaunt from stress and insufficient sleep. The Jedi Council convened emergency sessions, their discussions growing more desperate with each meeting. The war had become a hydra. Cut off one head and 2 more would appear. In the Senate, debates raged about resource allocation for the Rim conflicts. Senators from affected worlds pleaded for help, their voices thick with emotion. "My people are dying," a Rodian senator shouted, his green skin flushed with anger. Others argued for focusing on core worlds, fearing the Republic was overextending itself. Chancellor Palpatine listened patiently, his expression sympathetic but his eyes holding a calculating gleam. "We must do what we can," he said soothingly, "but we cannot abandon the core worlds." The political maneuvering continued as the situation in the Rim worsened. Each decision made in the Senate had life or death consequences for beings on the frontiers. The Techno-Union's forces finally breached Lesu's defenses, droid armies pouring into the capital. Republic clones and Twi'lek fighters made their last stand in the city's central plaza. Chiam Syndulla fought alongside clone troopers, his blaster spitting fire with deadly accuracy. "Fall back to the tunnels," he ordered, seeing the battle was lost. The retreat was chaotic, with droids pressing their advantage relentlessly. Numa covered their withdrawal, her small frame moving with surprising speed through the rubble. The air filled with the sounds of destruction, blaster fire, collapsing buildings, and the whine of droid processors. Lesu fell once more, its streets running with the blood of defenders. Republic fleets continued their endless redeployment, ships moving from one crisis to another. Clone pilots caught brief moments of rest between missions, their helmets resting beside them. "Where are we headed next?" a young pilot asked, his voice betraying exhaustion. His commander checked a datapad, frowning at the latest orders. "Rodia," he replied grimly. "The pirate situation has escalated." The pilots exchanged weary glances, knowing the respite would be short-lived. The war's frontiers kept expanding, consuming new worlds and new lives. No matter how many battles they won, the conflict continued to spread. The refugee ships continued their desperate journeys, seeking safety in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. Sulistan families huddled together, sharing stories of their lost homeworld. "Do you think we'll ever go back?" a child asked, her large eyes filled with hope. Her mother smiled sadly, brushing dust from the child's face. "Someday," she replied, though she didn't believe it herself. The ship groaned again, a sound that had become constant background noise. Outside the viewports, stars streaked past, each one representing unknown dangers. The refugees had escaped one nightmare only to face another. No world was truly safe. The Hutt palaces of Nal Hutta echoed with rage, Jabba's furious roars shaking the very foundations of his opulent fortress. His massive form trembled with fury as he learned of his son Rotta's kidnapping. The air grew thick with the scent of expensive spices and something darker, fear, sharp and metallic. Gamorrean guards shuffled nervously, their axes held loosely as they avoided their master's wrath. "Find him," Jabba bellowed, his Huttas carrying across the vast throne room. The walls, adorned with trophies from conquered worlds, seemed to absorb his anger. Outside, the swampy atmosphere of Nal Hutta pressed in, humid and oppressive. The crime lord's empire suddenly felt fragile, built on the foundation of family. Meanwhile, on the remote planet Teth, an ancient monastery stood silhouetted against twin suns. Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano approached cautiously, their senses stretched to detect any threat. The air smelled of dust and ancient stone, carrying echoes of long-dead monks. "Rotta is being held in the upper chambers," Anakin whispered, his mechanical hand resting on his lightsaber. Ahsoka nodded, her montrals twitching as she scanned the crumbling architecture. Inside, they found the infant Hutt, surprisingly small and vulnerable. The little creature cooed softly, his large eyes blinking in the dim light. As they prepared to leave, the monastery trembled under the impact of landing craft. Separatist forces had arrived, their droid armies advancing up the mountain paths. Anakin scooped up Rotta, the Hutt's weight surprising, despite his small size. "We need to move, now," he said, urgency sharpening his voice. Ahsoka took point, her green lightsaber casting eerie shadows on the ancient walls. The monastery became a battlefield, blaster fire scorching centuries-old murals. Droids advanced relentlessly, their red photoreceptors glowing with mechanical purpose. Rotta began to cry, his wails echoing through the stone corridors. The sound seemed to attract more droids, their programming homing in on the noise. On Coruscant, Senator Padme Amidala moved through the lower levels, following a tip about the kidnapping. The air grew thick with the stench of waste and decay as she descended into the Undercity. Zero the Hutt's palace stood in stark contrast to its surroundings, garish and opulent. Inside, the crime lord held court, his slimy form draped in expensive silks. Senator Amidala Zero purred, his voice like oil over water. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Padme maintained her composure, though her senses screamed warning. The palace echoed with the sounds of indulgence, music, laughter, and the occasional rancor roar from the depths. Back on Teth, Anakin and Ahsoka fought their way through the monastery. The infant Hutt had fallen silent, his small body trembling with fear. "We're pinned down," Ahsoka reported, her blaster fire deflecting incoming shots. Anakin surveyed their position, calculating odds with military precision. The monastery's ancient architecture provided both cover and traps. Droids fell into hidden pits, their metallic cries echoing briefly before silencing. Rotta began to cry again, the sound cutting through the battle's din. The noise attracted more attention, forcing the Jedi to fight harder. The monastery seemed to groan under the assault, its ancient stones protesting the violence. Padme's investigation led her to Zero's private chambers, where she discovered evidence of his betrayal. The Hutt had orchestrated his nephew's kidnapping to seize control of the Hutt clans. "You won't get away with this," Padme declared, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Zero laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "I already have," he replied, pressing a hidden button. Alarms blared throughout the palace and guards converged on Padme's position. She fled into the service corridors, the sounds of pursuit close behind. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone from blaster fire and something else. Zero's distinctive, cloying perfume. The chase led Padme into Coruscant's sewer system, the tunnels dark and oppressive. Slime-slicked walls made footing treacherous, the constant drip of water creating an eerie rhythm. Zero's guards pursued relentlessly, their boots splashing through the murky water. Padme moved with surprising agility, her senatorial robes abandoned for practicality. The tunnels echoed with their movements, each sound amplified in the confined space. She ducked into a side passage, holding her breath as the guards ran past. The air tasted of decay and recycled water, a reminder of the city's hidden underbelly. Anakin and Ahsoka finally reached the monastery's landing platform, Rotta secured in a protective carrier. Republic gunships waited, their engines roaring in anticipation. "Get him out of here," Anakin ordered, turning to face the advancing droid army. Ahsoka hesitated, torn between duty and concern for her master. "Go," Anakin shouted, his voice leaving no room for argument. The gunship lifted off, carrying Rotta and Ahsoka to safety. Anakin stood alone against the droid forces, his blue lightsaber a beacon of defiance. The monastery trembled under sustained bombardment, its ancient stones finally giving way. Padme emerged from the sewers near the Senate district, her clothes stained and her resolve hardened. She made her way to Chancellor Palpatine's office, evidence of Zero's betrayal in hand. The Chancellor listened with apparent concern, his fingers steepled before him. "This changes everything," he stated, his voice grave. Padme nodded, though she sensed something calculating beneath his expression. The news of Zero's betrayal spread quickly through the political circles. Crime lords who had remained neutral suddenly took sides, sensing opportunity in the chaos. The balance of power in the underworld shifted dramatically. Jabba the Hutt received news of his son's rescue with mixed emotions. Rotta was safe, but the betrayal by his uncle Zero cut deep. The Hutt palaces echoed with new sounds, not just rage but the whispers of retribution. Jabba summoned his lieutenants, his massive form radiating cold fury. "Zero will pay for this," he declared, his voice carrying across the throne room. The crime lords who had gathered shifted nervously, Understanding the implications, Jabba's influence extended far beyond Nal Hutta, touching criminal enterprises across the galaxy. His desire for vengeance would reshape the underworld's power structure. In the aftermath, Anakin and Ahsoka stood before the Jedi Council, reporting on their mission. The infant Hutt had been returned safely, but the political ramifications were just beginning. Master Yoda closed his eyes, feeling the disturbance in the Force. A dark path this alliance with crime lords walks, he observed. Mace Windu nodded, his expression grim. But necessary, for now. The Council understood that the war had forced them into uncomfortable compromises. The rescue of Rotta had secured Hutt neutrality, but at what cost? The lines between ally and enemy had blurred beyond recognition. The underworld's power dynamics continued to shift as Zero went into hiding. Crime lords who had once served Jabba now declared independence, sensing weakness in the old order. The Hutt palaces echoed with the sounds of betrayal and retribution. Jabba's forces hunted Zero relentlessly, their search extending across the galaxy. Meanwhile, other crime lords expanded their territories, taking advantage of the chaos. The Republic found itself navigating an increasingly complex web of criminal alliances. What had begun as a simple rescue mission had evolved into something far more dangerous. Crime lords became kings. The foxhole reeked of wet earth and blaster residue, a cocktail of war that had become Five's natural habitat. He worked by the light of a glow rod, fingers deftly adjusting the seals on his armor with a compact wrench. Each click-clack of metal against metal echoed in the cramped space, a counterpoint to the distant thunder of artillery. Standard-issue armor was designed for droids, not living beings who felt fear and fatigue. Fives had already reinforced the knee joints and added a secondary coolant line to the chest plate. Mud caked his boots, sucking at his ankles every time he shifted position. The modifications weren't just about survival, they were about reclaiming ownership of the body Camino had given him. Nearby, the 501st held the bridge against relentless droid waves. Rex moved among his men, his voice cutting through the chaos with calm authority. Steady, let them come to you. The bridge's duracrete surface was slick with rain and something darker. Blood, both clone and droid. Torrent Company formed a living shield, their white armor now stained with mud and gore. Jesse manned a repeating blaster, its barrels glowing cherry red from continuous fire. The air vibrated with the thump-thump-thump of explosions and the high-pitched whine of droid processors. Every time a droid fell, another two seemed to take its place. Fives finished his adjustments just as a fresh wave of droids advanced. He scrambled from the foxhole, his modified armor moving with him like a second skin. The reinforced joints absorbed impact as he dove behind a barricade. Covering fire, he shouted, and Torrent Company responded in perfect unison. The droids faltered momentarily, their photoreceptors scanning for the source of the unexpected resistance. Fives used the distraction to flank them, his modified armor allowing him to move silently through the mud. He took out 3 command droids before they even registered his presence. The click of his armor plates settling after movement was barely audible over the battle's din. On Camino, Tipoca City's sterile halls felt galaxies away from the muddy trenches. Caminoan scientists moved with clinical precision, their long necks bent over data screens. Back at the bridge, the 501st's position grew increasingly precarious. Rex took a blaster bolt to the shoulder, his armor absorbing most of the impact but still knocking him back. Hardcase dragged him behind cover, his face streaked with mud and concern. "We can't hold much longer, Captain." Rex gritted his teeth, assessing the situation through a haze of pain. Droids were pouring across the bridge now, their numbers seemingly endless. The muddy trenches had become death traps, offering little protection against concentrated fire. The smell of ozone and burnt flesh hung thick in the air. Rex activated his comm, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "All units fall back to secondary positions. Repeat, fall back." Fives heard the order and reacted instantly. His modified armor allowed him to move faster than standard issue, carrying wounded clones as he retreated. In the temporary command center, Rex received treatment for his wound while reviewing casualty reports. The numbers scrolled across his datapad, each digit representing a brother lost. Fives entered, his armor still muddy but intact, the modifications clearly visible. "Your modifications saved lives out there," Rex acknowledged, his voice tight with fatigue. Fives nodded, but his expression was troubled. "I found something in the droid command center," he said, handing Rex a data chip. The information revealed Kamino's accelerated aging experiments, proof that the clones' lives were being artificially shortened. Rex's face hardened as he processed the implications. The wrench clicks from Five's armor seemed suddenly louder, a reminder of their engineered existence. The 501 first regrouped in a new defensive position, digging fresh trenches in the rain-soaked earth. Mud coated everything, turning their movements into slow, deliberate struggles. Fives moved among his brothers, sharing what he'd discovered about their accelerated aging. The news spread quietly, a shared understanding passing between them. Jesse checked his blaster rifle, his movements more deliberate than before. Hardcase stared at his hands, as if seeing them for the first time. The rain intensified, turning their trenches into muddy rivers. The sound of digging tools scraping against earth mixed with the distant rumble of artillery. Each clone seemed to withdraw into himself, contemplating a future that had just grown shorter. As night fell, Fives continued working on armor modifications by firelight. The click-clack of his wrench became a soothing rhythm in the darkness. Other clones gathered around, watching him work with newfound respect. "Can you modify mine too?" Echo asked, his voice quiet but determined. Fives nodded, already planning improvements for his brother's gear. The firelight reflected off their armor, creating dancing shadows that seemed to give each clone a unique identity. The muddy trenches around them had become a workshop, a place where they reclaimed control over their engineered bodies. The rain continued to fall, but the sound of wrenches working against metal became a defiant answer to the war's chaos. Rex watched from a distance, his shoulder wound throbbing in time with his thoughts. The data about accelerated aging burned in his mind, a cruel reminder of their expendability. Yet looking at Fives and the others, he saw something the Kaminoans had never anticipated. Humanity emerging from uniformity. Each modification, each adjustment, was an act of rebellion against their designed obsolescence. The muddy trenches had become crucibles where individual identities were forged. The Republic's greatest weapon wasn't technology. The void stretched infinitely around the Republic fleet, a canvas of black velvet pricked with distant stars. Venator-class star destroyers moved like predators through the darkness, their dagger-shaped hulls bristling with weapons. Inside, the constant hum of life support systems filled the corridors, a reminder of the fragile bubble of atmosphere they carried. On the bridge, Admiral Tarkin studied tactical displays, his expression calculating and cold. "Bring us about to face the enemy head-on," he commanded, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. The massive cruisers turned slowly, their engines burning bright against the void. Ahead, separatist droid control ships loomed like mechanical spiders, their central spires glowing with malevolent energy. The vacuum silence between them felt charged, electric with impending violence. The battle began with streaks of turbo laser fire crossing the emptiness. Red beams from the Venators met green bolts from the droid ships, creating deadly intersections in space. Inside one cruiser, clone pilots strapped into their fighters, hands flying across pre-flight checklists. "All systems green," reported Taggart, his voice tight with anticipation. The launch bay doors opened, revealing the terrifying expanse of space beyond. Fighters poured out like angry hornets, their engines flaring as they engaged the enemy. The vacuum swallowed all sound, making the battle eerily silent despite the chaos. Emergency lights pulsed red through the corridors as the ship sustained its first hits. Aboard a Calamari cruiser, the situation grew desperate. The unique, organic design of the ship had served it well, but now its shield generators were failing. "We've lost the aft projectors," shouted a Cal officer, his webbed hands flying across controls. The ship shuddered under sustained bombardment, its graceful lines marred by black scorch marks. Emergency lights pulsed faster, creating a strobe effect that disoriented the crew. The captain, a Cal with knowing eyes, made a difficult decision. "Redirect all power to forward shields," he ordered, understanding the sacrifice this required. The vacuum outside seemed to press in, hungry and relentless. In a nearby fighter cockpit, a young clone pilot named Axe fought to control his spinning ship. Alarms blared as systems failed one by one. "Mayday, mayday, I'm hit and going down," he transmitted, his voice crackling with static. His last words were cut off abruptly, replaced by the hiss of dead air. In the command center, the transmission ended with a final burst of static. Operators stared at empty screens, knowing what that silence meant. The vacuum claimed another life, swallowing it without ceremony. Emergency lights continued their relentless pulse, marking time in the absence of sound. The droid-controlled ships pressed their advantage, their swarms of fighters overwhelming the Republic defenses. One Venator listed badly, its engine pods dark and lifeless. Inside, crew members struggled to contain fires and seal hull breaches. The emergency lights cast everything in bloody red, turning the chaos into a nightmare vision. Clone troopers moved with purpose, their training overriding fear as they fought to save their ship. The vacuum of space pressed against weakened bulkheads, a constant reminder of their vulnerability. The ship groaned under the strain, its metal structure protesting the abuse. Tarkin's flagship remained at the center of the battle, coordinating the Republic response. "Concentrate fire on the lead control ship," he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. The Venator's turbolasers unleashed a devastating barrage, punching through the droid ship's defenses. Inside the enemy vessel, droids scrambled to contain the damage, their mechanical movements lacking urgency. The ship began to break apart, its central spire collapsing inward. The vacuum swallowed the debris field, leaving no trace of the once formidable vessel. Emergency lights pulsed in time with the ship's remaining power, a heartbeat in the darkness. The Calamari cruiser made its final stand, its shields failing completely. "Abandon ship," the captain ordered, his voice carrying surprising calm. Escape pods launched into the void, tiny specks against the vastness. Republic fighters continued their dogfights among the wreckage, weaving through debris fields. "Watch out for that debris," shouted one pilot, his voice strained. His warning came too late as a wingman collided with a piece of shattered hull. The transmission ended abruptly, replaced by static. The surviving pilot pushed on, his movements mechanical with grief and determination. The vacuum offered no place to hide, no sanctuary from the battle. Emergency lights pulsed in his cockpit, a steady rhythm against the chaos. The stars beyond seemed distant and uncaring, witnesses to the destruction. As the battle raged, the true scale of the conflict became apparent. Ships burned on both sides, their wreckage expanding the debris field. The vacuum absorbed the light and heat, leaving only cold emptiness. Clone pilots transmitted final messages, their voices cutting through static before falling silent. Each loss was felt throughout the fleet, a ripple in the force. Emergency lights pulsed in time with the ship's failing power systems, a countdown to extinction. The void battles had become a microcosm of the entire war, vast, impersonal, and utterly devastating. In the aftermath, the Republic fleet regrouped, counting their losses. The droid-controlled ships had been defeated, but at tremendous cost. Venator cruisers limped through space, their hulls breached, and their crews exhausted. The Calamari cruiser was gone completely, along with its brave crew. Emergency lights continued to pulse in damaged ships, a reminder of how close they had come to total destruction. The vacuum silence seemed deeper now, more profound after the violence. Stars shone coldly above, indifferent to the carnage below. The war had expanded beyond planets, beyond systems. It had claimed the void itself as its battlefield. The stars themselves were battlefields. The Senate Rotunda echoed with competing voices, its massive dome amplifying every shout and whisper. Bail Organa stood at the central podium, his Alderani robes immaculate against the chamber's muted tones. "This endless slaughter serves no one but the weapons merchants," he declared, his voice carrying conviction that resonated through marble corridors. War hawks erupted in response, their collective roar drowning out his measured words. Senator Medici slammed his fist, the sound cracking like a whip through the chamber. "Weakness invites invasion," he bellowed, his face flushed with righteous fury. Hologram displays flickered erratically above the delegates, their unstable projections mirroring the fractured state of the Republic. The air grew thick with recycled air and hotter tempers, each breath tasting of stale arguments. Chancellor Palpatine observed from his elevated position, fingers steepled before him. His expression remained calm, almost detached, as the debate spiraled into chaos. "Order," he finally intoned, his voice somehow cutting through the din without raising volume. The chamber fell silent, senators turning their attention to the man who held their fate in his hands. "These are extraordinary times requiring extraordinary measures," Palpatine continued, his tone reasonable yet carrying undeniable weight. The hologram display stabilized momentarily as if responding to his authority. Bail Organa felt a chill run down his spine, sensing the carefully calculated performance. The Chancellor's next words would reshape the Republic's future, though none yet realized how completely. In the Senate cafeteria, separatist spies moved among the delegates like ghosts. Their disguises were perfect: minor aides, journalists, even junior senators. One such operative slipped a data chip to a Nemordian representative, the exchange hidden by the bustle of lunchtime crowds. The air smelled of cafe and synthetic nutrients, masking the scent of betrayal. Nearby, Senator Amidala discussed supply routes with a colleague unaware of the enemy intelligence gathering just meters away. The spies listened intently, recording conversations that would be transmitted to Separatist command. Hologram news displays flickered overhead, showing battle reports that influenced the very discussions being monitored. The Republic's heart was compromised, its secrets bleeding through invisible wounds. Palpatine addressed the Senate again, this time requesting expanded emergency powers. "To protect our citizens, we must act swiftly and decisively," he argued, his voice carrying notes of paternal concern. The hologram displays behind him showed images of burning worlds and displaced refugees. Bail Organa rose to object, but found his voice drowned by senators demanding security at any cost. "The Chancellor knows best," someone shouted, the sentiment rippling through the chamber. Palpatine accepted the authority with apparent reluctance, bowing his head as if burdened by responsibility. The hologram displays flickered once more, briefly revealing a sinister smile before returning to neutral. Democracy eroded not with a bang but with the polite applause of those surrendering their power. That evening, a poisoned chalice found its way into the hands of a vocal opponent of Palpatine's new powers. Senator Fang Zar collapsed during a private dinner, his face turning purple as he gasped for air. The assassin had moved with professional efficiency, leaving no trace but the deadly residue in the senator's wine. Medical droids swarmed the scene, their mechanical voices coldly reporting the poison's properties. The news spread through the Senate like wildfire, senators glancing at each other with newfound suspicion. Bail Organa examined his own drink with sudden distrust, the crystal goblet suddenly seeming sinister. The hologram news displays reported the death as tragic natural causes, but everyone understood the message. Power now came with a deadly price tag. Separatist spies continued their work, now focusing on senators vulnerable to blackmail or bribery. One operative met with a Pantoran representative in a private corridor, exchanging credits for classified military movements. The air tasted of ozone from faulty lighting and the metallic tang of corruption. "The Chancellor's new powers make our work easier," the spy noted, voice barely above a whisper. The Pantoran nodded nervously, glancing down the empty hallway before accepting the data chip. Hologram displays flickered erratically in the corridor, their unstable light casting long shadows that seemed to move independently. The Republic's defenses were being dismantled from within, piece by carefully placed piece. Palpatine addressed the Senate once more, this time announcing the formation of a new Security Oversight Committee. "To ensure these temporary powers are not abused," he explained, his expression conveying appropriate solemnity. Bail Organa watched as the committee members were announced, all loyalists who would never challenge the Chancellor's authority. The hologram displays showed the committee members' faces, each image sharp and clear, unlike the earlier flickers. "This is theater," Organa muttered to Amidala, who nodded grimly beside him. The air in the chamber felt thick with illusion, reality bending to Palpatine's will. Democracy was being reshaped into something unrecognizable, its forms preserved while its substance vanished. In the Senate archives, a junior researcher discovered irregularities in the voting records for Palpatine's emergency powers. The hologram displays showed impossible majorities, votes cast by senators known to be absent. Before she could report her findings, her terminal mysteriously malfunctioned, erasing all evidence. The researcher looked up to find two Chancellor's guards standing over her, their expressions unreadable behind their helmets. Bail Organa gathered like-minded senators in a private office. The hologram displays deactivated to prevent surveillance. "We must act before it's too late," he urged, his voice low but urgent. Senator Mon Mothma nodded, her face pale with concern. But how? Palpatine controls the courts, the military, even the message. The air tasted of fear and determination, a dangerous combination. Outside their window, the Senate rotunda stood illuminated against Coruscant's night sky, its dome seeming to pulse with unnatural light. Hologram news displays flickered in the distance, their propaganda messages visible even from this vantage point. The republic they had sworn to serve was slipping away, replaced by something darker. The final days of Year 1 settled over the galaxy like dust after battle. Christophsea's crystal forest still bore scars. Malevolence's financial districts lay in ruins, and Ryloth's liberation felt fragile as spun glass. Clone troopers moved through occupied worlds with hollow eyes, their youthful faces aged beyond their engineered years. The Republic held key territories, but each victory had been paid for in blood and broken machinery. In the command tents, Rex and Cody reviewed casualty reports by flickering light. The numbers scrolled endlessly, each digit a ghost haunting the margins of their datapads. "We lost 3 squads on Felucia yesterday," Cody murmured, his voice rough as sandpaper. Rex nodded, thumbing the edge of a damaged helmet, Five's helmet salvaged from the mud of Teth. Outside, the wind carried the distant rumble of artillery, a reminder that peace was an illusion. The tent smelled of Bacta, burnt wiring, and the faint, acrid scent of fear. They wrote their reports with mechanical precision, each word a small act of defiance against oblivion. On Coruscant, the Senate debated the cost of Year 1 in hushed, furious whispers. Bail Organa stood before the chamber, his voice strained but resolute. "We have traded lives for territory, ideals for survival," he declared, his hologram flickering like a dying flame. Warhawks roared in response, their voices amplified by desperation. "Surrender is not peace," Senator Tar bellowed, his jowls trembling with rage. Palpatine watched from his throne, fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. The air hummed with the buzz of holograms and the crackle of unresolved tension. Democracy frayed at the edges, its threads pulled taut by the weight of endless war. Kamino's cloning facilities worked tirelessly, vats churning out replacements for the fallen. Kamino and scientists observed accelerated aging processes with clinical detachment, their long necks bent over glowing displays. Clone cadets trained in storm-lashed halls, their young faces already etched with the hardness of veterans. The air smelled of antiseptic salt spray and the sterile scent of engineered life. In the barracks, Domino Squad's legacy lived on in whispered stories. Heavy's sacrifice, Five's innovations, Echo's resilience. The clones were no longer just soldiers. They were symbols of the Republic's resolve and its moral decay. The Sith moved in shadows, their victory invisible but absolute. Dooku reported to Sidious via hologram, his voice laced with subdued triumph. "The Republic bleeds, Master," he said, the image flickering like a bad dream. Sidious smiled, his face half hidden in darkness. "Good. Let them grow weary. Let them forget why they fight." The air between them crackled with dark energy, thick with the scent of ambition. Across the galaxy, separatist spies whispered in Senate corridors, pirates raided refugee convoys, and corrupted senators signed secret pacts. The Republic's foundations crumbled, not from invasion but from the rot within. On Ryloth, Cham Syndulla walked through the ruins of Lasu, his boots crunching on shattered crystal. The planet was free, but freedom felt like a fragile thing, easily shattered, easily lost. Numa followed him, her young face hardened by too much war. "They'll come back," she said. her voice flat with certainty. Chan nodded, gazing at the horizon where separatist ships had vanished. The air smelled of dust, smoke, and the bitter tang of unfinished business. Liberation had a cost, and it was paid in the currency of perpetual vigilance. In the Jedi Temple, masters tended to wounded Padawans, their healing hands unable to mend the deeper wounds. Yoda meditated in the solitude of his chamber, feeling the tremors in the Force like distant thunder. A stalemate. This is, he murmured, his ears drooping with ancient sorrow. But darkness grows in the quiet spaces. The temple's halls echoed with the footsteps of weary Jedi, their lightsabers dimmed, their spirits frayed. The air hummed with the quiet hum of meditation and the occasional stifled sob. Even the Order's light seemed to flicker, casting long shadows where none should be. As 21 BBY drew to a close, the galaxy held its breath. The Republic had survived Year 1, but victory felt like a mirage. Planets burned, fleets clashed, and the Sith's influence seeped into every crack. In the quiet moments between battles, the weight of it all settled like a shroud. The clones fought, the Jedi bled, and the Senate debated while the darkness waited, patient and hungry. The war had no end in sight, only the endless echo of blaster fire and the silent fall of tears. And in the quiet, the stars watched,